Hello, my beautiful blossoms, blooms, and buds, and welcome to another of our fanfic holiday specials. Not that the fanfics are holiday-y, but they're just some really amazing works. I'm Rosebud Reads, and I am so happy and excited that you are here. Um, so the fanfic that we are going to read today is called the Time Traveling Letter Series. So it's not just one, it's two, but they're part of a series by MichelleFeather. And it's a really amazing series. So I think you are going to enjoy it. Oy, sorry, my chair is making noise. But anyway, I am super excited to get started with this for you. Just so you know, the additional details about the story, the author, as well as the link to the original fan fiction is in the description below. So go ahead and give the author some love, go say hey, and give them some kudos because they definitely deserve it. But on that note, let's just go ahead and get started. Okay, pulling it up. Oop, my screen is being funky. Hang on. Okay. So the first story in this series is called Watch It Burn, Let It Die, because we are finally free tonight by MichelleFeather. So the summary is, a year after Wei Ying's death, Lan Zhan is given a letter that was found in A-Yuan's robes. He never imagined what would happen after reading it, or a time travel fic where love is requited. Lan Zhan stared down at the letter sitting on the table in front of him, a hand gripping the edge of the wooden table, the other lightly raking through A-Yuan's hair as the 4-year-old slept in his lap. It was found in A-Yuan's robes, addressed to you. The seal had been broken. That was something his brother had willingly admitted. Afraid of what the letter could have contained, he felt a need to make sure it wouldn't cause an already fragile Lan Zhan even more distress. It was completely blank when I opened it. Lan Zhan knew it wasn't. He could see Wei Ying's horrid handwriting through the folds of the pages. He saw his name written on top. Xiang Sang told him that since the letter's contents were blank, he waited until a year had passed in order to give it to him, giving his brother time to heal, physically and mentally. Lan Zhan, Lan Zhan, Hangguanjun. The words stared at him. Wei Ying's words stared at him. Lan Zhan didn't know why he was hesitating, why he was afraid to look at the contents of the letter, to know what Wei Ying had deemed so important for him to know, that he had written it down, hiding it within A-Yuan's robes. There was no way for Wei Ying to know that the letter would end up in his hands, that A-Yuan would even survive the siege. Every time Lan Zhan tried thinking what could be inside, his mind blanked. There wasn't anything he could think of that would require Wei Ying, of all people, to write it down. His brilliant mind moved a mile a second. If he didn't write down what was in his mind at every moment, it would be gone the next. Anything that wasn't an invention, he shrugged off, once confessing to Lan Zhan that he didn't really remember what good things others had done for him. It wasn't something his mind had space for. Initially, Lan Zhan thought that meant Wei Ying had forgotten their interactions, but oddly enough, Wei Ying tended to remember the time they spent together in extreme detail. It makes you special, Lan Zhan. Not even Shiji takes up that much space in my mind. He reached out, brushing his fingers over the dried ink spelling out his name before he picked up the letter. Lan Zhan, Lan Zhan, Hangguanjun. I know they're coming. They have to be. I know that I could decimate them all. I know they think I'm raising an army. But you've been here. You know the people who are here. It will be a bloodbath. The Wen say they are capable of defending themselves, but not against the numbers that will come. I fear for them. I fear that even in my state, I won't be able to protect them. I've already failed in protecting King Ji and Aning. I don't know when they're coming. I don't know if I'll even be able to see you again. God, do I want to see you again, Lan Zhan. I understand now that you were trying to stop me during Nightless City, that when you were trying to stop me during Nightless City, you weren't trying to injure me. You easily could have taken me down if you deemed I needed to die. I would have accepted that, if you deemed me worthy of death. Anyone else saying I deserve to die or should be dead means nothing to me. I don't value their opinion of me. Their words mean nothing to me. Your words do. Your judgment means everything to me. If you deemed me deserving of death, I would have impaled myself on your blade myself. King Ji told me that I should have told you sooner, that if I had taken a second to realize you were never against me, that I could trust you with anything, that maybe things would have been different. If this letter makes it to you, then I know I will have been able to. So here it goes. I haven't had a golden core since shortly after the fall of Lotus Pier. When Chao threw me into the burial mounds, that's where I was for those 3 months. I told Jiang Cheng I knew where my Grandmaster's mountain was, that she was able to repair the golden core he had lost. I lied. Jiang Cheng's core was melted. When Qing had a theory about core transfers. I know now that you likely were concerned for me, that you weren't angry with me, that you didn't hate me for my cultivation. If you had experienced the same change, I would have acted the same way. You weren't always the easiest to read, my dear Azan, but I've always been oblivious to when people show genuine care for me. I'd like to think you care for me. I'd like to think that if I had told you to stay when we met in Yiling, that you would have. I'd like to think that I'm not seeing things, misinterpreting your actions. King Ji said to me that night, "Why'd you let your boyfriend leave?" And I know in that moment she was joking, but the devastation I felt was real. I know I likely won't see you again after that day. I wouldn't see you again after that day. After I walked you down the mountain, I thought, if I don't see him again, at least we ended on a good memory. Popo tells me you brought me to the burial mounds after Nightless City. She said no one saw her, but she saw you and your sect elders, the tears on your face. I don't know what happened, Lan Zhan. I don't know why you saved me, why you brought me to the burial mounds, why your elders were there. Popo said it was 3 days after I left for Nightless City to try and at least bring back Aning and King Ji's ashes. Something happened, didn't it? You did something that would cause your sect elders to have to find you, to find us. What did you do, Lan Zhan? What did they do to you? If they even thought of hurting you, that they should be glad that I'm likely dead. Right. I was talking about my secrets. I love you, Lan Zhan. It took some time for me to even realize it. With everything that has happened, I haven't had the time to think about myself, the things I want, the things I wish I was able to have. Every second since we left the Xuanwu cave, I have lived on edge. Lotus Pier, the burial mounds, the Sunshot campaign, finding Wen Ning, rescuing the Wens, constantly being seen as a threat. I never had time to think about what I truly wished for, what I could have done if not for everything that has happened to me. King Ji told me once that I shoved down my feelings towards you, not because they weren't genuine or worth my time, but because I knew that it would cause you more problems than I am worth. I no longer have a golden core. I'm no longer equal in that sense. Even if I had the time to consider asking you how you felt about me, I wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't want to force you to choose between me and your family. I can't be the reason another family falls apart. So, That's my big secret. You're amazing, you're thoughtful. Every time I see you, I can't help but fall for you even more. Including all the times you were yelling at me. Something about how you look when you're angry is very attractive, Lan Zhan. I thought that, even if this letter never makes it to you, I will have finally spoken those words into existence. I found the highest point in the burial mounds and shouted my confession into the wind. Perhaps it still exists within the echoes of the breeze. Cultivation world may not know how truly and deeply in love with you I am, but the universe knows. And between you and me, it was comforting to shout out my love. I don't know how soon after their arrival that this letter may end up in your hands. Perhaps your brother found it and burned it. Jiang Cheng finding my atrocious handwriting and ripping it to shreds. The burial mounds burning and taking A-Yuan with them. I don't know if my words will ever be seen by your beautiful eyes, but I hope they are. I hope you're living. You're okay, or trying to be. I don't want to make assumptions. I don't want to assume things about you, but I can imagine you grieving my death, being the only person to grieve me. It feels weird, in a way, to speak about myself as if I'm not there, but it is the only end for me. I wish I could have realized your intentions sooner. I wish I would have spent more time with you. I wish I would have asked you to stay. I wish I had the courage to confess, to let you know how I felt. Even if you rejected me, told me you never wanted to see me again, were disgusted with me, at least I would have been able to tell you. I don't know what the future holds for me, but I hope one day I'll be able to see you again. I hope we'll be able to meet again, perhaps on a rooftop with some emperor's smile. I love you with all my being, my body and soul, forever until the end of time. Your Wei Ying. Don't worry about others being able to read this. I've put an array on the pages so that only the intended receiver can read it. And those who are allowed, you just need to infuse yours and their spiritual energy on the page at the same time. I'm a genius, I know. Tears poured down Lan Wangji's face as he tried to stifle his sobs, not wanting to wake A-Yuan. You could see dried tears on the page, the shaking hand that wrote sloppy characters, how some sections were written faster than others. How the words, "I love you," were the clearest, sharpest, most perfectly drawn characters on the page beside his own name. The paper was rough, torn along an edge of faded white. There was a crinkle along the last page, a hole in the shape of a crescent along the bottom right corner. Considering the state of the burial mounds, these sheets of paper were likely the nicest ones Wei Ying had. Maybe he specifically went to Yiling to buy new paper. Maybe these were the last sheets he had. Maybe he wrote this right before the sex came. Maybe days before, or maybe a month before. If he had mailed it before the siege, would it have arrived in time for Lan Zhan to do something? Would he have been able to prevent Wei Ying's death if he knew? Would he have been listened to? Would they trust his words? A tear fell down onto the page, smearing the ink right above Wei Ying's name. Lan Zhan's hand darted out, trying to absorb the tear before it ruined his Wei Ying's words. More tears falling down his face as the ink smudged, the paper wrinkled around the tear. Fearing ruining the letter even more, he quickly placed it onto the table before bringing a hand up to his mouth, covering the sob that had managed to escape. Wei Ying loved him. He loved him. Likely his last words to the outside world were to Lan Zhan. His last declaration to the world was his love, not even knowing if it was reciprocated, if it would even be welcomed by the Lan. Lan Zhan looked down at A-Yuan, closing his eyes as more tears poured down his face. He felt the weight of the child Wei Ying had protected, the one he thought of as his own, a child who would have been killed without a single thought if he had been found. Another sob wrecked Lan Zhan as he reached for the letter, a wild look in his eyes as he looked back at how Wei Ying had written his name, Zhan, as he reached for the letter, a wild look in his eyes as he looked back at how Wei Ying had written his name, how he had spoken about him, how he had shouted his love into the air. There was a storm in his mind, an endless sea of what could have been, what they had lost, what would never be. What if he had spoken more, made his intentions clearer? If he had told Wei Ying he wanted to take him back to Gusu, not for punishment, but to keep him safe, away from the judgment of the cultivation world, and their two-faced lies, their profit-hungry schemes, their thirst for power in any way they could get it. He grasped the page in his hand, wincing as he accidentally cut his finger along the bottom edge. As he was about to check for blood and damage to the pages suddenly started glowing a light red, slowly brightening and engulfing him in the light. Lan Zhan held onto A-Yuan, pushing the child gently closer to him. As the light reached its climax, Lan Zhan found himself closing his eyes, looking away from the light. Then he felt a cold breeze on his face, making the tear tracks that had made their home on his face more distinct in his mind. A sob caught in his throat when he opened his eyes. "What took you so long?" There was no stopping his next actions. Lan Zhan ran across the roof, wrapping his arms tightly around the boy, letting out a heartbreaking sob as he tucked his head into his neck, inhaling a scent he had almost forgotten about. He felt Wei Ying's arms wrap around him in the same intensity, a hand raking through his hair, a teasing tug at the end of his forehead ribbon. "You're here. I can't believe you're here," Wei Ying whispered, his voice breaking as tears fell down his face. "Wei Ying," he let out in between sobs, eventually pulling away and placing the other's face in his hands, watching as tears fell down his face, his mouth slightly open, the words in his mind non-existent as he looked into his love's eyes. Xianji? Xianji Gaga? A voice from beneath them drew their attention away from each other. Both Lan Zhan and Wei Ying stared wide-eyed at the one child that had wrapped his arms around Wei Ying's leg, looking up at both of them with a wide smile on his face. "A-Yuan, you remember?" Lan Zhan hesitantly spoke, reaching down and resting a hand on his son's head, taking in a deep breath as the boy nodded. Xianji Gaga put me in a tree and I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was with you, Rich Gaga. Wei Ying took in a sharp breath. "You found him?" He spoke softly, a tear falling down his face as he reached down to pick up the child he thought of as his own. Lan Zhan nodded, swallowing before meeting Wei Ying's eyes. After I heard about the siege, I went." He took in a shaky breath. "I do not know if I was looking for anything or if I needed physical proof that you were gone." Lan Zhan leaned into the hand that had cradled his face, a thumb brushing away the tear that had fallen. "How long before you opened the letter?" "Xiang Shang found it in A-Yuan's robes, but I only received it a year after your death." Wei Ying let out a small laugh. "A year, huh? Nice to know that Array wasn't impacted by time." Lan Zhan looked at him. "Array?" Wei Ying nodded. "Did you cry or bleed onto the paper?" "Both." Wei Ying wore a sad smile on his face, leaning onto the older man as he slowly, gently guided the trio to sit on the roof. Placing A-Yuan in his lap, he reached over and took one of Lan Zhan's hands, a thumb rubbing over the back of his hand before he spoke softly. "One of the projects I had been working on. More of an idea I'd never thought would go anywhere. Just like I just wanted to try it to see if I could do it. It was a time travel array. It's a conditional array. It needed to meet the requirements laid out by the caster in order to work." He reached up and wiped the tears that had fallen down his face. I thought I thought if you read the letter and there was the smallest chance you reciprocated my feelings. Wei Ying looked up at Lan Zhan. I thought we could start over. Go back to when we first met, but with all our memories intact, and change things for the better. He looked down at his hands, fisting one of them in his robes. I thought that if it didn't work, then at least I was still able to get my words out. If it worked, then I wasn't seeing things that weren't there. I wasn't making incorrect assumptions about you. A tear fell down his face as he watched Lan Zhan's hand carefully unclench his fists, taking it in his. I am not the best with my words. I should have been more clear with my intentions. I never wanted to lock you up or punish you. I wished to protect you. Lan Zhan looked up at the night sky, a tear sliding down his face. I thought that if I could protect you from the way they were looking at you, speaking about you, that it would help me. That it would give me the space and time to get back on the orthodox path. Wei Ying finished, his voice soft. Lan Zhan nodded. I did not know what had happened, why you had turned away from your sword, where you had been for those 3 months. Your cultivation was not something I took issue with, but rather I worried what effects it would have on you. I jumped to conclusions, assuming things about you that you thought you knew better, that you were arrogant of what effects resentful energy can have on a person. He sighed. And I assumed you would have done all of this willingly. Never once did the thought of necessity cross my mind, but it should have. He turned to Wei Ying. I should have known something had happened. With the amount of time we had known each other, I knew you loved your sword. You took pride in your strength and your core. You knew your limits and still pushed them. When you stopped using your sword, I should have known. Wei Ying reached up, tucking a loose strand of hair behind Lan Zhan's ear. I didn't exactly make things easier on you. I fought you, antagonized you, thought the worst of your words. He let out a small laugh. I told you, I only recently realized that you cared, that your words were filled with as much fear for me as they were care. I was too cocky, too full of myself during the Sunshot campaign to even notice. Even if you had told me, I don't think it would have done anything. Wei Ying sighed, running a hand through a now sleeping A-Yuan's hair. What do we do now? Lan Zhan hummed. Tomorrow begins the lectures. If Wei Ying stays on his best behavior, Shifu will have no reason to hold animosity towards you. Perhaps you will be able to spend less time in the library copying lines this time. Wei Ying snorted, covering his mouth as laughter echoed throughout the night sky. Old man Lan certainly will always find a problem with me, my dear Hangguan Jun. It's in my nature to cause problems for him, just like my mother before me. He spoke after calming his laughter. Lan Zhan stood, brushing a hand over his robes before extending it down towards Wei Ying and their son, pulling the pair up. With the moon and the universe as their witness, Lan Zhan reached up and gently pulled off his forehead ribbon, much to Wei Ying's shock, before slowly wrapping it around Wei Ying's right wrist. He swallowed, hesitantly looking up. Lan Zhan, what exactly does your sect ribbon mean? It controls our restraint and can only be touched by our family and cultivation partners. Wei Ying's eyes widened. But I've touched yours so many times. The other nodded. So what does wrapping it around one's wrist mean? Lan Zhan carefully held Wei Ying's wrist in his hands, a finger tracing over the ribbon as it continuously wrapped around the other's forearm. It typically means intent to wed, a betrothal, or in some instances can be used to marry in its own right. Lan Zhan looked up. I hope I am not making incorrect assumptions. Wei Ying let out a laugh, a beautiful wide smile crossing his face. Lan Zhan, did you just propose to me? He nodded, a small smile forming on his own face. Wei Ying looked down at the sleeping toddler in his arms before grumbling. I almost wish A-Yuan hadn't come back. Then I'd have you all to myself, he harumphed. Now I have to share you with our son. Our son. Lan Zhan spoke as he leaned forward, resting his bare forehead against his beloved's. Wei Ying suddenly let out a small laugh. Boy, is Jiang Chang going to be riled up about this tomorrow. Will you be all right? Wei Ying reached up, combing a hand through the other's hair. I've had a year to sort through everything. This Jiang Chang is not the same as the one who led the siege. If all things go well, he will never become that Jiang Chang. He paused, hesitant in his next words. I don't think I'd like to go back to the Jiang sect, however. Lan Zhan hummed. Wei Ying may stay here if he likes, or we can go somewhere Wei Ying would be more comfortable. Where would we even go? I hear the burial mounds is not as bad as everyone thinks. Lan Zhan smiles as he watches Wei Ying's face contort in laughter, clutching their son in his arms as he looks up at him with tears in his eyes, a wide smile on his face. Would you like to take a page out of my parents' book? Travel around the world with a donkey and a little one? He spoke, eyes soft as a hand raked through A-Yuan's hair. You do not think others will worry? Wei Ying scoffed. Of course they will. If two predominant young masters disappeared in the middle of the night, anyone who has the resources would contribute to the search. He paused. The smart thing to do would be to leave at least a letter. At least let Lan Shichen or Lan Kairen know that you've gone. Jiang Chang might just think I've decided to abandon the lectures entirely. It's not out of the realm of things I would do. He spoke, his eyes drifting down to the white ribbon around his wrist. We can come back when the Wens start to become too insistent. Whether they attack Cloud Recesses or Lotus Pier first, we can do as much as we can to prevent or provide aid. Wei Ying nodded, a puff of air escaping him. Lan Zhan questioned, head tilting slightly. It's nothing. I just thought about what if we just left and never came back? If we found Wen Qing and her family and just stayed there. Let everyone think something happened to us, that we disappeared without a trace. I don't know about you, Lan Zhan, but there's nothing here for me anymore. He sighed, turning and resting his head on Lan Zhan's shoulder. I've lived through all of this. I know ultimately where loyalties lie, what people are willing to do, what they're capable of doing. There is nothing that could convince me that Jiang Chang wouldn't find a way to blame any attack on Lotus Pier on me. If the Dafen Wen end up in the same situation, he still would choose to not help me. Sect leader Jiang and Madame Yu never really cared about me, just what I could provide to them in the form of safety and protection towards their children. A tear fell down his face. I love Shiji, I do, but even with good intentions, she always pushes away my emotions when I would voice them. I was expected to just take everything that was thrown my way with no one stopping to think about how I felt or if I even wanted to do what was expected of me. He felt a hand cup his face, leaning into the warmth. Wei Ying will never have to feel that way ever again. I will never allow for such mistreatment towards my Zaiji. Lan Zhan wiped away the tear that had fallen down Wei Ying's face. My sect prided itself on our righteousness, our sense of justice, but when I needed their support the most, when the most injustice was going on, my claims were ignored. My words not believed because of Xiang Shang's knowledge of my feelings towards you. He paused. I am assuming you do not remember what happened after Nightless City? Wei Ying shook his head, a sense of dread pooling in his chest. I did rescue you. What Wei Popo saw was correct. I hid you in a cave for 2 days before my sect and sect elders found us. Lan Zhan swallowed, tears beginning to pool in his eyes. They wanted me to surrender you, hand you over to be properly punished for your actions. I refused. You fought them, didn't you? Lan Zhan nodded. I know what my family is capable of when they believe rumors and lies, what they are willing and capable of doing in the face of my own betrayal towards my elders. A tear fell down his face. Xiang Sheng believed in Jin Guang Yao when he said the Wens in the burial mounds were war criminals, powerful cultivators who had been among those in the front lines of Wen armies. Xiang Sheng believed in Jin Guang Yao when he was told that you were manipulating me, convincing me that those in the burial mounds were innocents, that your cultivation made anything possible. Xiang Sheng did not believe me. He believed his sworn brother over his own. Lan Zhan took in a shaky breath, reaching over and grasping Wei Ying's hand. Even if we were not together in this moment, the trust I have towards Xiang Sheng will never be what it was. He condoned a punishment that could have killed me. He took members of my sect to the burial mounds to slaughter innocents. It took physically branding myself to convince Shifu to let me keep A-Yuan. He spit out the words, his face contorting in a mild anger. They saw A-Yuan, Shifu, and Xiang Sheng. They knew where I had been, that I had gone to the burial mounds and returned with a child. Even then, they did not believe my words when I spoke of the Wens. Lan Zhan leaned into the hand that cupped his face. Then we'll go. We'll collect what we need to, then we'll go, Wei Ying whispered, like he was concealing a large secret. I'll sneak down the mountain with A-Yuan while you go back to your room and get the things you need to. I have everything I need. Wei Ying let out a small laugh. My dear Hengguan Jun, you're not carrying Wanji. You'll need your Guqin. We can stop somewhere and buy a dizi, or I can make one, but Lan Zhan, certainly there are things you wish to take with you. He paused, looking up through his eyelashes. Perhaps something that belonged to your mother? Or something that you know would inconvenience your brother and uncle. I'm all in for the long game. Something that isn't needed right now, but would be vital during a specific time. Perhaps we let your father know we're leaving. He would understand the most, right? He cautiously spoke. I forgot father was alive, Lan Zhan whispered, eyes slightly widening as he looked off in the distance towards where his father's secluded home was. If we told him, we could also warn him about the things that are coming. He has no reason to believe you'd lie to him. Wei Ying paused. Unless there's a barrier surrounding the house that alerts when breached, he mumbled, watching as Lan Zhan nodded. If we told father, he would keep it a secret from Xiang Sheng and Shufu. He might ask that we at least write to him, prove we are still alive, but he would keep his word. Wei Ying adjusted his grip on a sleeping A-Yuan before reaching for Lan Zhan's hand. Where first? Lead the way. Sneaking through cloud recesses was surprisingly easy, Lan Zhan thought. There was an apparent lack of patrolling within the gates, making it easier to slip into the inner sect residential area and into the Jingxi. Sneaking into the private quarters belonging to his father may not be as such. Wei Ying watched as Lan Zhan moved around the room with a small Qiankun pouch in his hand, occasionally picking up something and placing it inside. He looked around the room, and despite never truly thinking about what a home belonging to Lan Wangji would look like, this was exactly what he would have imagined. Everything was laid out to be as efficient as possible. Books more frequently read room. It was clearly a home that belonged to Lan Wangji. I am finished. Wei Ying looked up, eyes landing on Lan Zhan. Wei Ying strapped on his back, fluffy white coat in his arms. He rose to his feet and walked towards him, blushing as Lan Zhan wrapped the coat around his shoulders, tying it at his waist, making sure A-Yuan was not uncomfortable, before the pair silently walked out of the jinshi. As the trio made their way towards Qing Heng Jun's secluded residence, the security and patrols increased, but not enough for them to get caught. I am beginning to understand how easily you kept sneaking around. The patrolling done is inadequate and ineffective. Wei Ying snorted. The only reason I kept getting caught was because it was you who kept finding me. Lan Zhan hummed, a faint smile on his face. Was always looking for Wei Ying. A-Yuan finally stirred when the residence was in the pair's line of sight. The 4-year-old looked at his surroundings before clutching his hands on the coat that surrounded him. Xianqi, Gaga, where are we going? A small voice spoke. We're going to speak to your Baba's father. Then we'll be off on our own journey. Wei Ying spoke softly, running a hand through the child's hair. Will we be able to see King Ji and Ning Shushu and Popo and... Yes, little radish. We'll go find all of them, but right now I need you to be good, okay? He booped the child's nose. This is an important conversation your Baba and I are about to have. A-Yuan nodded, a smile on his face as he tucked his head into Wei Ying's neck. That's so cute. Wei Ying turned, watching as Lan Zhan raised his hand to a ward that surrounded the house, sending a small pulse of energy into it. Father is notified when someone is at the wards. He has to let us in. Shufu is the only one able to override them. Won't he be sleeping? Lan Zhan shook his head. Based on the writings that I found after his death, he most often spent nights awake, opting to sleep during the day. He said he liked the silence and serenity the night provided. As Lan Zhan finished speaking, the ward shimmered and the door to the house opened. The man... Welcome back! Okay. I'm going to reread the paragraph because I'm not sure if it actually went through. You knew my parents? He breathlessly spoke, feeling a hand capture his own from beneath the table, a thumb resting over his knuckles. I didn't know Chanks well, but Kengxi and I were, well, acquainted. He paused. I considered her family, but I doubt Kairen feels the same. She was the one who introduced me and Miao Liang, thinking that we would have been a perfect match. Lan Yongsheng looked down at his lap, a small smile on his face. We wrote often. She would tell me where she and Kangxi were, where they'd been, what they had defeated. I believe a few of her letters mentioned you as well, but that's not the reason you're here. He coughed, straightening up. I believe you mentioned an array? Wei Ying nodded. I embedded a conditional array into a letter addressed to Lan Zhan. I don't know what god was looking out for me, but he was able to meet the conditions and activate it, sending us back. Wei Ying looked over at Lan Zhan, a wide smile on his face. And the conditions for this array to be activated? The sect leader spoke, a knowing smile on his face as he took notice of his son's ribbon on Wei Wuxian's wrist. He needed to love me, just as I love him, even if it took me a while to realize it, and I was a bit of a dumbass for not realizing how much he cared about me. A-Yuan let out a giggle. Word down. The child spoke between giggles, holding his hands up to his mouth. Wei Ying's jaw dropped. You! Don't listen to what she says! Wei Ying. Right. Why we're here. He sat up straight before slightly deflating. Wait, you do believe us about the time travel, right? Yan Long Sheng nodded. I find no reason not to believe you. In fact, even what little I've seen between you two and the simple fact that you came to me and not Shichen or Kai Ren tells me that what you're going to say is very important. He paused. And something that either Kai Ren would not believe or something you would not like him to know. Eyes closing in understanding as he watched his son nod. The future. It was bad? Very. And you've come to me for help in preventing as much as possible, because you yourselves will not be here to be active participants? The pair froze, eyes wide as they looked at the older man across the table, who had a smile growing on his face at their reactions. Azan, A-Ying, why are you looking at me like that? You told me the condition of the array was that Azan needed to love you. His ribbon is wrapped around your wrist. If you came from a horrible future and immediately got engaged, then came to me of all people, well, I can't help but assume you came to someone with the power to enact changes, and someone who wouldn't judge and not believe you. Lan Yongsheng ran a hand across a deep scar along the top of the wooden table. I would have done the same thing if I found myself in your position. He looked up at them. Where will you go? I'm assuming you're leaving as soon as you finish speaking with me? Lan Zhan took in a quick breath. You believe us that quickly? Yang Sheng let out a small laugh. An, I have no reason to think what you say are lies. You are a quiet, reserved child, Azan, but you are not a liar. You love deeply. You truly feel very much, but you have trouble expressing it. I was much the same at your age. He looked over at Wei Ying. And if A-Ying is anything like his mother, you have fallen into a fierce, loyal, and righteous love. If you two would like to actually wed before you leave, I would be honored to witness and officiate a ceremony right now. The pair stared at the man before turning their eyes to each other, both in the same state of disbelief. I think I speak for us both when I say we appreciate the offer, Lan Zhongshu. But there are some people we'd like to find before any formal ceremony takes place. Wei Ying scoffed. If there's a formal ceremony at all, he mumbled. We will notify Fukin when a ceremony is set to take place. Lan Zhan paused, the hand not in Wei Ying's fiddling with the hem of his robes. I would like for you to be present, if that is something you wish. The older man hummed. Please, A-Ying, call me Gong Gong, if you are comfortable doing so. You are engaged to my son. I consider your mother a martial sister. Lan Yongsheng smiled at Wei Ying, his eyes wandering down to A-Yuan. When the time comes for you to wed, I wish you both all the best. If you two truly wish for me to attend, I will. Simply let me know when and where it will take place, and I'm sure I can manage to sneak out. He paused, a serious look crossing his face as he looked at the two teenagers. No matter what happens, no matter how everyone else reacts, you will all be welcomed within the walls of Cloud Recesses at any time. His eyes widened as he watched a tear fall down his youngest son's face. Thank you, Fukin, Lan Zhan whispered. Lan Zhan said he would expect you to ask us to write to you, whether frequently or not, and I would like to make sure that happens. Wei Ying spoke, relinquishing his hold on A-Yuan as the child crawled into Lan Zhan's lap, hands coming up to his face and wiping away the tears that had fallen. I would like that, the sect leader smiled. I see it as a great sign of trust being placed on me that you two are here. You could have just simply left, not told anyone, let the sex believe something happened to you. Let them think the worst. But here you are, speaking with me. He reached up and wiped away a tear. I know I have not been the best father. I have neglected my duties as a father and as a sect leader, forced my duties onto my brother while I sit here alone. There is nothing I can do to make up for my failings in the past, but you two have shown me that I need to step up, act like an actual sect leader and a father. Fukin, in this future you came from, I don't know what hardships you and your peers faced, but I know that I likely did nothing, he swallowed. I assume I was likely dead. You died when the winds burned cloud recesses, about a year and a half from now, Wei Ying mumbled, tightly clutching Lan Zhan's hand. Yang Sheng closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. I see. Then this time things will be different. I will make sure of it. Please, to the best of your abilities, let me know what needs to be changed, what is going to happen, and what you two think should be done instead. For the next 2 hours, Lan Zhan and Wei Ying recounted the future they came from, watching as Lan Yongsheng meticulously wrote down a timeline of events, with main causes, main players present, who was killed, injured, impacted, and what could be done to prevent or minimize the events. Wei Ying speculated that the wards surrounding cloud recesses could greatly be improved, benefited by a stronger cultivation base and power, that a fire-repelling aspect could be added to the wards themselves. Lotus Pier's wards were also brought up, as Wei Ying himself witnessed how easily they fell when the winds took the pier. He knew the chances that someone like Madame Yu admitting that the wards were inadequate was close to zero. Even Jiang Fingmian himself never took Wei Ying's suggestions seriously. As much as he no longer felt the familial relationships between himself and the Jiangs, he did not want Lotus Pier to fall again, for all the disciples to die again. Lan Fukin, Lan Zhan stated as he stood in front of his father, A-Yuan's hand in his own. Thank you. Thank you for believing us, for listening to us, he sniffled. I truly believe that with your aid, the sects will not be as unprepared for what is to come as we once were. Lan Zhan leaned into his father's hand as he cupped his cheek. You are your mother's son, Azan. Once you set your heart on something, nothing will keep you from achieving it. He reached over and laid a hand on Wei Ying's shoulder. The two of you, I know you will live happy lives, and I hope that I can continue to be part of your lives. The pair nodded. When we find Wen Qing and her family, we will write. If we come across anything serious, we will write. Once we settle somewhere, we will let you know when you can write to us, Lan Zhan spoke, walking into his father's open arms. I can probably find a way to replicate something similar to the Jin butterflies, a similar type of communication talisman. Once we find King Jingji, I'll have more time to work. Keeping her and the family safe is my top priority right now. Wei Ying bent down, picking up A-Yuan, the child wrapping his arms around Wei Ying's neck. And you are sure that you do not want to leave a note, a letter to Jiang Ying? Jiang Yanli. Wei Ying shook his head, turning to look out the window. I don't know them any explanations for my actions. They will be upset, of course, but Jiang Cheng's upset will turn to anger, turn to rage. Anger at me disappearing without a trace, without letting him know where I was going. He won't even know I'm not coming back until I'm gone for at least a month. That's when he'll start to actually think I'm not coming back. Hopefully by then we will have found the Dauphin Wen. He took a deep breath. I know where the Jiang's loyalties lie, what they truly think about me. When Jiang Cheng and I were being sent away by Madame Yu and Jiang Fingmian, they both told Jiang Cheng that they loved him, that he would be okay. They told me I needed to protect him, that I needed to keep him alive no matter what. A tear fell down his face. I paid with my life because of those words. The trio departed Cloud Recesses just before Mao Shi, right before everyone started waking up. The base of the stairs, they turned around and gave one last long look. They didn't know when they would be back, but they knew that if they were to return, they would be welcome. Lan Zongzu himself gave them entry tokens, belonging to the sect leader, ones that would not be impacted by any changes in the wards, only by the wards being in a lockdown, preventing anyone from entering and exiting. Baba, Adai, are we going to find King Qing Jiji and Ning Shushu now? A-Yuan spoke from between them, a hand reaching up towards both of them. Lan Zhan and Wei Ying looked at each other with small smiles on their faces before each holding one of A-Yuan's hands. Yes, A-Yuan, let's go find them. So there's author notes down here, and it says, my first time travel fic that I've posted anyway. I hope you enjoyed. Truthfully, it was supposed to go in a completely different direction. It initially wasn't even time travel, but when you let my mind wander, it can create even better alternatives. Qing Hang Jun isn't someone who canonically gets much attention. Little is known of him to begin with, and he is dead for 99% of the story, so being able to explore his character was something I enjoyed. He trusts his sons, knows what it is like to do things for the one you love, so when Wei Wuxian shows up engaged and says, surprise, we time traveled, there's no room for doubt in his mind. I do have plans to write a sequel of what happens afterwards, how the Sunshot campaign goes, how the cultivation world and their families react, the wedding. But for now, this is a happy ending I am satisfied with. I hope you enjoyed. Yongsheng is forever righteous. Title is from The Great Escape, Boys Like Girls. Okay, so we're going to read the second one in just a moment. I just need to reset my internet, which I apologize is kind of unprofessional for recording that's not my own, but I want the rest of it to be good and not to keep like skipping like that. So I'll be right back. I'm gonna do this. Be right back. And we're back. Okay. Sorry about that. But hopefully we won't have any more internet interruptions as we move on to the second part of the time traveling letter series called If I Could Go Back, I'd Do It All Over With You Again. And this is shocker, also by MichelleFeather. Here's the summary. A year has passed since Lan Zhan and Wei Ying left the cultivation world, leaving everyone to think the worst. In their absence, Lan Yongsheng has been improving his sect, implementing new wards, taking new security measures, making allies, all in an attempt to prevent the horrible future his son and son-in-law came from. When he receives a letter from the pair announcing they are to finally wed, the pair that have long been hidden and assumed dead by the cultivation world finally interact with those they have left behind. So this is the long-awaited sequel. Can be read without reading the first part, but there would be missing context. Well, we don't have to worry about that because we just read it. Enjoy and stay warm. Title, Piece of Your Heart by Mayday Parade. Cringe warning, descriptions of suicide, non-graphic but mentioned, occurs when finding the clinicians. No, that one. Chapter 1. That bastard shows his face again. Nai Huaisang put his head in his hands as he listened to Jiang Cheng's hourly rant about how when he saw Wei Wuxian again, there would be serious consequences. It had been a month since the guest disciple lectures had started. A month since Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji, but Huaisang wasn't supposed to know that, had disappeared. Nai Huaisang knew both Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji were supposed to be attending the lectures, and that Wuxian had gone back to Kaiyi for the Jiang's invitations, only to seemingly vanish. Huaisang wasn't as familiar with Lan Wangji as he was with Lan Shichen, but even he knew the second Jade wasn't prone to disappearing acts like this. And with how stressed out Shichen was, it was likely that something had happened to Wangji. It was also obvious that the Lan sect didn't want this information spreading. For two notable young masters to disappear within Lan territory, the other sects knew they would immediately pull their disciples from the lecture, never again sending them back. Huaisang knew that Jiang Cheng and Jiang Yanli had been communicating with Lan Shichen and Lan Kairen about Wei Wuxian, with Jiang Cheng scuffing, stating that it was exactly within Wei Wuxian's behavior to do something like this, disgracing the Jiang sect in such a way. Jiang Yanli, while holding a similar core thought, was worried about the boy. A-Yuan likes to cause trouble, Lan Liaoshi, but his pranks never last this long. Breaking a Lan rule, Huaisang eavesdropped on a conversation between Lan Shichen and Lan Kairen about the missing boys. Shufu, do you think it's time to notify sect leader Jiang about his missing disciple? A month is a long time, especially without leaving a note behind before leaving, or not at least notifying us and the Jiangs that he's okay. Shichen hesitantly spoke, tracing a finger over the rim of the empty teacup in front of him. Kairen sighed. I suppose then we should tell Xiang Shang about Wangji. He should know that his son has been missing for a month. Kairen stared at the wall across the room. I don't want to tell him until Wangji came back, but it isn't like Wangji to vanish like that. He rarely leaves cloud recesses to begin with, being outside of night hunts. Shichen looked up at his uncle. I trust Wangji to be safe, but I can't help but suspect that something else is at play. Kairen took a drink from his cup, setting the empty teacup on the table. You suspect that Wangji and Wei Wuxian disappeared at the same time? That something or someone was able to harm or kidnap them? I don't see any other worthy explanation as to how two top-of-their-class cultivators could vanish without a trace. Kairen took a deep breath. Let's tell Xiang Shang. Maybe he will be able to provide a view we are unable to see. Huaisang scrambled from his hiding place before he could be seen by the pair as they exited the Hanxi, making their way towards the private residences. He ran. He ran until he stopped at the guest disciple dorms, being stopped by both Jiang Cheng and Jiang Yanli. Nice, Xiang. Where are you going in such a hurry? The Jiang spoke, an arm grabbing his, keeping him from running. He sighed. Might as well share the secret. Lan Wangji is also missing. Shichen Gaga and Lan Laoshi suspect something happened to both Wei Xiang and Wangji Xiang that caused both of them to disappear. Oh, there's a little bunny separator. That's so cute. Lan Yongsheng felt a knock at the ward surrounding his home as he was clearing off a shelf of cultivation books. He had been waiting for this conversation for the past month. With a wave of his hand, he briefly dropped the wards and let the two enter. Meeting his brother and eldest son at the door, he ushered them in, sitting them down at the table, just like he had with A-Zhan and A-Ying a month prior. He watched the pair as they fidgeted in their seats, not knowing how to start the conversation, not knowing that Yongsheng knew exactly what they were about to tell him. Xiangsheng, I don't know how to tell you this, Lan Kairen started. looking up and holding his head high as he spoke to his brother. Wang Ji disappeared a month ago. We do not know where he could have gone, what time in the night he vanished, or why he left, whether voluntarily or by force. Either intentionally or coincidentally, a Jiang disciple vanished that day as well. Shi Chen and Kai Ren watched as the sect leader took in the information, expecting him to be shocked, outraged, demanding a search party to have started 3 weeks ago. He had no such reaction. Lan Yongsheng sat back, hands folded in his lap, as he looked at his brother and son. He had thought about what reaction he should have, whether he should shout, yell, demand disciples search for his son immediately. Perhaps he would have, if he didn't know exactly where his son, future son-in-law, and grandson were. If the pair hadn't come to him before leaving. If there wasn't a letter within his robes from the couple stating that they had found Wen Qing and the Dauphin Wen and were relocating them to territory outside of Yiling, outside of any sect's jurisdiction. I see, he mumbled, reaching forward to pick up his teacup. He could practically hear his brother's thoughts. Your son is missing and you still won't show any sign that you care? Wang Ji has never acted out like this. As his father, you could at least act like his disappearance is something to be concerned about. Yang Sheng glared at his brother as he practically slammed the teacup on the table. Don't you dare accuse me of not caring for my son, he shouted, a hand fisted in his lap. Of course I care that A-Yuan is missing. What kind of father would I be if my youngest son disappeared and I didn't care? A-Yuan is capable of protecting himself. I'm sure that he is fine. There was no sign of a fight. Kairin shook his head. And as far as we can assume, A-Yuan left of his own volition. Why? He will just have to tell us when he returns. The sect leader turned to his eldest son, watching a tear fall down his face. A small part of him knew that if A-Yuan and Wei Ying hadn't told him about the future they came from and that they were leaving, he may have felt compelled to tell them that he was worried, frantic, in starting a search party. But he knew the truth. Listened to A-Yuan talk about his punishment, about Shi Chen's lack of trust in his word, how no one listened to his words that he and Ying spoke. He saw the love between the two, how much they cared about each other, how much the cultivation world had failed them. He heard them speak about the atrocities of the Wen sect, and then the Jin sect, about rescuing the Wens and taking them to the burial mounds, about how the Jiang sect abandoned Wei Ying when Jiang Wanyin knew that the Wens were innocent civilians. He watched his son take young A-Yuan into his room, placing him on the bed to sleep, before coming back to the table and speaking of things no child his age should hear. About the Sunshot campaign, about the Xuan Wu, the indoctrination, the burning of cloud recesses, the massacre of Lotus Pier, Wei Ying giving his core to Jiang Wanyin, then watching as his supposed brother abandoned him when he needed him most. Wen Xiao throwing A Ying into the burial mounds, how he harnessed resentful energy to survive. How this cultivation caused a rift between him and A-Yuan, how misunderstandings caused the pair to drift apart. How he brought back Wen Qianlin's consciousness, watching Wen Qing and Wen Ning walk away from him to sacrifice themselves. The siege. Lan Yongsheng knew everything his son and future son-in-law had gone through. He knew how the greed of the Jin sect caused death, destruction, and lies to be spread. How A-Yuan had tried to defend Wei Ying, only to end up punished at the hands of people who had raised him, who knew who he was, who had raised him. Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian trusted Lan Yongsheng with this information, with their current location, and for sect leader Lan, that showed about how the two felt about their families more than anything. Do you need me to write sect leader Jiang about Wei Wuxian? Kairen shook his head. I will have Jiang Ying right. Perhaps Wei Wuxian has simply gone back to Lotus Pier and forgotten to notify his martial siblings of his choice. Lan Kairen and Lan Shichen exited Qingheng Jun's residence, walking in silence back to the Hanxi. Shichen paused, a hand grasping his uncle's sleeve. Shichen? He questioned, watching his nephew's eyes widen. Shufu, you never said Wei Wuxian was the Jiang disciple that was missing, he whispered, watching Kairen's eyes widen as he came to the same question. How did Fuqin know Wei Wuxian was missing? Whoops. Little Freudian slip there, right there. Sorry, I was getting a little raspy. Jiang Fingmian arrived in Cloud Recesses a week later, departing the second he read his son's letter about Wei Wuxian being missing. Dai, that bastard wouldn't happen to have come home, did he? If he did and didn't tell us all. His arrival in Cloud Recesses was the final nail in the coffin for Jiang Yanli. Seeing her father sitting across from Lan Zhangzu, who had recently announced his break from seclusion, already starting to implement serious security measures that even the guest disciples had started worrying, but seeing the grim expression on her father's face, A-Yuan truly was missing. For father to show up here rather than responding to A-Cheng's letter, like they were all expecting him to, she started to worry. Lan Zhangzu, why was I not notified as soon as Wei Wuxian was deemed missing? Jiang Zhangzu demanded, practically glaring at the Lan sitting across from him. Fingmian, I apologize. I myself have only recently found out as well. My youngest seems to have also disappeared around the same time as Wei Wuxian. Lan Yangsheng spoke, glancing over at Lan Kairen. I apologize, Jiang Zhangzu. When your children first notified me Wei Wuxian had not shown up, then supplemented their own descriptions of his behavior. Initially, it was suspected that he simply had decided to return to Lotus Pier. It was not until both he and Wang Ji had been missing for a month that we started suspecting something was awry, Kairen explained, his shoulders slightly slumped as he spoke. I did not tell my brother about Wang Ji or Wei Wuxian until it seemed the situation had become dire. Both boys are capable cultivators. If they disappeared for a week due to providing help, that would be within character for them. But for a month, without any letters. Jiang Fingmian held up his hand. I assume the other sects do not know about their disappearances? Jiang Cheng sat up from his seat. Dai. The other sect's disciples don't even know something is going on. Lan Wangji is known to be cold, aloof, and overall poor at socialization. So it makes sense if he wasn't attending the lectures. Linai Huaisong and Jin Zixuan know Wei Wuxian was supposed to be attending, and both have expressed concern, one more than the other, about his lack of attendance when they both saw him when we arrived in Kaiyi. The Jiang heir explained, hands fisted in his lap as he spoke. Fingmian huffed, setting both his hands on the table in front of him. I apologize for the stress Wei Wuxian has caused to you and your sect, Lan Zhangzu. A-Yuan certainly is known for his mischief, but I can't believe he would do something as reckless as this. He scoffed, eyes wandering towards his children. I can't believe he would do something that could jeopardize Ali and Ah-Cheng's safety. He is supposed to be the one keeping an eye on them. It was in that moment that Lan Yangsheng finally understood why A-Ying felt the way he did about the Jiangs. The sect leader hadn't had much interaction with Jiang Fingmian before his seclusion. He knew the type of people Jiang Fingmian and Yu Ziyuan were when they were teens, but to see Figmian seemingly focus entirely on how A-Ying had abandoned his position around the Jiang children, rather than how he had been missing for a month. Even if A-Ying and Azan hadn't left, Yang Zong would not have let the boy return to Lotus Pier. Anyang won't be happy when she finds out, he heard Jiang Yanli mumble, turning to Jiang Ying as he let out a harsh laugh. Wei Wuxian is in for it when she finds out. He'll be lucky to get out of it, able to walk. No, letting them leave was the best decision. There's another little bunny. A year had passed. A year where Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian's disappearances had spread, where they were still missing. There had been a few supposed sightings, ultimately being proven false, people trying to scam their way into the reward money the Jiang and Lan sects had set aside for any information that could lead to them being found. All major sects and a few of the minor ones had initially supplied their own disciples for search parties. However, at about the 6-month mark, there was a drop in those current search parties. There wasn't a declared stop for searching for the two boys, but there was a silent conversation among cultivators. It had been 6 months. Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian had been gone for 6 months. If they hadn't been found by the 6-month mark, many believed that they simply would never be found. A story was circulating among the common people about the pair. They had died heroically, saving each other from a massive beast before ultimately succumbing to the beast, unable to defeat such a monstrosity, the monster devouring their bodies and weapons, leaving no trace of their presence behind. Of course, these stories were false, simply not true. Not only was there no sign of a fight anywhere near Cloud Recesses or anywhere in the surrounding towns, Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian had never met, leading some to believe it impossible that the pair had vanished together. The Lans and Jiangs were in somewhat constant communication. Yang Shang was hesitant about writing to Figmian, and with every letter he found his hesitation becoming more of a valid concern. The Jiang sect leader was initially concerned for his head disciple. It was easily agreed upon that both Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian were capable of providing for themselves and keeping themselves safe, but as more time passed, Yang Shang saw the Jiang's letters becoming more angry, more targeted in their hate, even once stating that Wei Wuxian was just like his father, packing up and leaving in the middle of the night without telling anyone. He also saw his brother and eldest son watching him closely, watching to whom he wrote to and who he received correspondence from. Yang Shang was aware of his slip-up, saying A-Ying's name when he should not have known which Jiang disciple was missing. But he was more careful now. His letters to Azan and A-Ying were not addressed to anyone. He hand-delivered them to the delivery post in Kaiyi. Yang Shang knew that no one would read his correspondence. No one would dare read his private conversations. But that didn't mean they didn't see who he was conversing with. The missing pair had been addressing their letters as being from Han Guanjun and Yiling Laosu, titles they'd once held in a prior future, names that only the four of them would recognize. Kairin and Shichen, of course, asked who the pair were. With such titles, they would assume to have heard of someone called the Lightbearer and Yiling Patriarch. Yang Shang would go on to explain that they were a pair of rogue cultivators he had met on one of his trips to the Unclean Realm, deciding to start speaking with Nai Mingjue about the future war as soon as possible. The Nai agreed with him. Seeing smaller sects fall to the Wen only indicated to the new sect leader that war was on the horizon, that they needed to join forces sooner rather than later, that failing to recognize the threat the Wen sect posed before it was too late could cause massive casualties, unnecessary deaths. Yang Shang was able to convince Nai Minju that the civilians were innocent no matter what. It was something A-Ying had told him he needed to convince the Nai of. If they could convince Nai Mingchu that not all Wens were bad, that a person's surname does not determine their value, that not all Wens hold the views Wen Ruohan does, that some might be unable to leave the Wen sect, whether that be out of fear, lack of money, or threat of violence, they would be preventing a large amount of injustice and mistreatment. A-Ying had left him with instructions on how to improve the wards around cloud recesses, and when he finished the wards 1 month after the pair had left, he immediately implemented them. The elders were initially hesitant, asking why he had created such strong wards, specifically targeting the fire prevention radicals, but could not deny their sect leader's demands, so the wards were implemented. The Nai and Jiang were also given the designs for such wards, with only the Nai actually adding them to their sect. How dare you assume we are incapable of protecting ourselves? Do you think you can create a ward protecting a place you haven't been to in 2 decades? We Jiang are capable of protecting ourselves. We do not need another sect deeming us incompetent of protecting our disciples. Madame Yu had practically kicked him out of Lotus Pier after that. He returned from his brief trip to Lotus Pier to be confronted physically the second he arrived by his brother, eldest son, and the Lan elders. They knew he had taken a trip to Lotus Pier with the intention of sharing the improved wards, but what they were concerned about was the increase in patrols, the safety provisions being increased, the amount of care that Yang Sheng was showing towards the people of Kaiyi. There had been an incident 2 months after the disappearances of Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji. A waterborne abyss had been discovered in Bailing Lake, jeopardizing the safety of those living in Kaiyi. Land techniques and prior instructional manuals would suggest draining the lake, letting the lake bed be exposed to the sun for years in order to naturally purge the abyss, resentful energy from the land. Ying said that he didn't want that to happen this time, that so many people would be impacted, that the Lans being set in their ways and being unable to look into other solutions that might not have been as orthodox was actively causing more people to suffer. He had sent the sect leader an array, right before the abyss was discovered, explaining that it was a bit unorthodox in its ways, but it would destroy the abyss without causing too much focus onto the Lan sect. Wei Ying had told him to only take people he trusted, to come up with a story about how he discovered the array in a book in the forbidden section of the library. Any story to explain why it was working, but that it could only work once. Wei Ying had embedded resentful energy into the talismans he sent to Lan Yongsheng. Talismans that would not cause the resentful energy to be detected, but would be vital in destroying the abyss. And they certainly worked. The people of Kaiyi and those who used Bailing Lake as means of transportation, income, or entertainment were no longer hindered by the abyss. They were able to continue on with their lives, being told that there was simply a large amount of water ghouls in the lake that the Lan sect had cleared out. Kairen and Shichen were constantly watching him. Ever since that slip-up saying Wei Wuxian's name, the pair seemed to suspect the sect leader knew more than he was letting on. And he certainly did. He knew they had been following him ever since he left Cloud Recesses, but he wasn't going to let them following him prevent him from attending his son's wedding. Yang Sheng could feel their energy behind him. Granted, they were following at quite a distance, but he knew they were there. He was to meet Azan and A-Ying and Yiling at an inn they mentioned had a happy memory for them. Yang Sheng had brought gifts with him. That, he would unashamedly state, he had started gathering the second the pair left Cloud Recesses, and that the pile had only grown the longer the pair went without being wed. That's really sweet. I love that. As he landed outside of Yiling, he heard 2 pairs of footsteps walking towards him. Ignoring them, staying on his original path, he continued forward, ignoring the voices calling out to him. Lan Yongsheng approached the inn, a smile crossing his face as he saw the back of his youngest son, a fine and detailed silver hairpiece adorning his head, and a lac of his ribbon. "A-Zhan," he called out to him, smiling as he turned around. He heard the voices behind him silent. "How have you been?" Yang Sheng asked, crossing the distance between him and his son, bringing the boy into his arms. He felt his son tense in his arms as he looked over his shoulder, likely spotting the two followers. "We have been good. The Dauphin Wen, now Dauphin Wei, have settled in the land we found. There are other children, so A-Yuan has friends his age around him. Wei Ying sometimes finds it hard to differentiate our experiences. Some of the Wei were never at the camps. They died during the war, so he has gotten to meet dozens of people he was unable to before." Lan Wangji explained, a small smile on his face as he spoke to his father. "Lan Zhan!" said Lan, closed his eyes with a small huff. "Excuse me, Fukin. Wei Ying was anxious about your arrival. He wanted to impress you and provide you with an adequate gift. I told him it was unnecessary." His son explained before turning around and walking towards the Wei boy, who had a basket in his arms. "Lan Yang Sheng?" A firm voice spoke from behind him. He sighed, finally turning to address his brother and son. "Yes." He watched as his brother looked furious, eyes flickering towards him, behind him towards A-Zhan and A-Ying. A-Yuan had tears in his eyes. Likely, his eldest had only followed his brother out of concern. The pair had been suspicious of Yang Sheng's correspondence, suspicious of the reaction to the most recent letter from Han Guanjun and the Yiling Laosu. The sect leader had never taken a trip as far as this trip to Yiling, and specifically requesting to go alone, that no one accompany him, not telling Kairin of the reason for his visit to the distant town. "There's an important event I've been invited to attend. It would be a lifetime's worth of regret if I were unable to attend," the sect leader spoke to his younger brother. "You cannot just leave without telling us where you are going. What event are you even attending? The only letters you get are from this Han Guanjun and Yiling Laosu, two people no one has ever heard of." Yang Sheng held up his hand. "You will not prevent me from leaving. I will be gone for 2 weeks. If I am not back by then, I give full permission to form search parties." Len Kairen scoffed. "So you're going somewhere that's dangerous?" "No, but I do intend on coming back. So if something has happened to me, if you have not heard from me, assume the worst." He looked at his brother, watching as his eyes drifted towards the pair behind him. Yang Sheng sighed, closing his eyes as he took a deep breath. "Kairin, it's a long story and not mine to tell. I can assure you that I have always known where A-Zhan and A-Ying were. They were the ones who came to me to say they were leaving." "They? So they vanished together?" Lan Chen mumbled, his eyes focusing over his father's shoulder, his brother and Wei Wuxian. "What is this story? Why would Wang Ji and Wei Wuxian come to you? How did they even meet?" Lan Kairen questioned, taking a small step closer towards Yang Sheng. "Kairen, Baba, Adai!" A child ran past the brothers, a rattledrum in one hand and a paper butterfly in the other. The vendors seemed used to the child running around, and used to knowing to whom he was running to. The crowd parted, letting the child run to his father's. Yang Sheng heard both his brother and son take in a sharp breath as A-Yuan ran into A-Zhan's arms, his son kneeling down and picking up the child, showing him the toys in his hands. Ying had set down the basket he was holding, opting to pick up the paper butterfly and fly it around the child's head, both him and A-Zhan smiling as the child laughed. The child reached over, wrapping his arms around the neck of his other parent, A-Zhan relinquishing his hold on A-Yuan as he was sitting in Wei Ying's arms. The three Lans watched as Lan Wangji reached down, picked up the basket Wei Wuxian had set down, then looked in their direction. He gave a small nod before turning and following the pair as they walked further into Yiling. The sect leader understood his son's instructions. Lan Zhan knew his brother and uncle were there, that they would have questions, that they likely would try to drag him back to Cloud Recesses. Zhan was trying to avoid this happening in public, where everyone in Yiling would see and hear the words getting exchanged. His son was well acquainted with the dark side of the Lan sect, far more intimately acquainted with their most brutal punishment. It was 4 months after the pair's disappearance that Lan Yongsheng looked into the Lan sect's punishment records. Each physical punishment was required to be written down, as well as a signature of someone who witnessed the punishment taking place. Yongsheng couldn't remember a time where the discipline whip had been used, much less in such a severe punishment as what his son had been given. He was inconsolable after he looked at the records. He wanted to storm into the Elders' Council and demand all of them receive the same punishment they had approved of for his son. He wanted everyone who had allowed such a punishment to take place to face the same fate, regardless of if they would survive it or not. There was such a rage inside of him. He wondered if Wei Ying would have been able to feel his resentment from Yiling with how much he wanted the heads of everyone involved. 5 centuries. The discipline whip had not been used once in 5 centuries. It had been used to inflict 5 lashes on Lan King Shan following his betrayal towards the Lan sect by giving another sect the blueprints to the wards around the Cloud Recesses, a map of all the entrance and exit points, both known and secret paths, as well as how the entrance tokens at the time operated. The information had been given to the Wu sect, a sect Yongsheng was not familiar with, but was able to trace its downfall from an almost major sect to now a minor sect residing in Jiang territory. When asked why he did it, Lan King Shan was unwilling to give a response, opting to stay silent as to why he betrayed the Lan sect in such a fashion. The cultivation world at that time was unsteady. The Lan, Jin, and Wen sects were already rising to power, becoming the first of the great sects. There was unrest among the smaller sects, fearing what would happen if the sects in power were to fall, if one were to take over and cause every sect to belong to them. The Wu sect was one sect that was approaching the size of the Lan sect, but were unable to garner enough support from the common people to establish themselves outside of their own territory. It was thus speculated and suspected that Lan Qingshan opted to give these plans and blueprints to the Wu sect in order for them to become stronger, to prove to the rest of the commoners that the Lan sect wasn't special, that they were just as able to provide assistance and security. The layout of the Cloud Recesses, entrances and exits, secret and hidden ways in and out, places where the wards were unable to be as strong. It was concluded that the reason these plans were included was to invade the Lan sect through its weak points, block off all exits and destroy the sect, absorbing all those who would turn to the Wu sect and renounce their Lan name or face certain death. Even with just 5 lashes, Lan King Shan ultimately succumbed to his injuries. He was only 35. He was a promising, respected cultivator. He should not have been able to die so easily. But that's the thing with the discipline whip, the sect leader found out. The wounds cannot be healed with spiritual energy. The whip itself physically alters the healing process and the spots where it inflicts damage. It would be physically impossible to heal oneself with their core or with help from other cultivators. Yang Sheng found a clinician's diary about the punishment, finding out exactly how Lan Kairen had succumbed to his wounds. Day 38. The patient refuses to speak to anyone or about anything. He simply stares out the window for the full length of the day, only looking away when food is delivered. I'm aware that he is still in pain. His breathing quickens when his wounds are being cleaned. His heart races. Even someone of his cultivation cannot help but wince as the bandages are changed and cleaned. Day 95. So remember, this is the warning part about suicide warning right here. As Lan Qingshan's primary clinician, it is due to my failure that I did not consider this possibility. When myself and my assistant arrived to change the patient's bandages shortly after Mao Shi, we found the patient unresponsive. A layer of the bedsheets was wrapped around his neck, tied to one of the pillars that runs across the ceiling. We estimate that he had been dead for 6 hours before being found. On his desk, he left a note in shaky writing, simply stating that he cannot deal with the constant pain, and how being dead would be much more peaceful than living the rest of his life in pain. My failure as a clinician caused me not to see the number one reason those who go under extreme punishments and pain tend to die: by their own hand. Lan Yongsheng was unable to speak to or see anyone belonging to his sect for a month, submitting himself to complete isolation and seclusion. The sect leader was capable of surviving on his own. He left a note to his brother that he needed time to think something through, that he would need as much time as he took, that no one was to disturb his seclusion unless the sect was being attacked. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the discipline hall. A-Yuan kneeling on the ground, his back exposed. An elder, or Kairin, or Shichen, standing behind him, a whip in their hand. He saw his son's back covered in blood, pooling around his body as he kneeled, forced to stay upright until the last lash. He saw his son in the Jingxi, unable to move from his bed, unable to do anything for himself. Finding out that the love of his life had died, that his own sect partook in the murder of innocent civilians. He saw his son, finding out his heart was dead, but remembering the boy he had met only once. Pushing his beaten, bloody body to the burial mounds. Finding A-Yuan. Finding him feverish, mumbling names and calling out to people who Lan Wangji knew were dead. Covering the child's face as he stumbled out of the burial mounds, not wanting the child to see the blood. The utter destruction of a place he once called home. Climbing the stairs of cloud recesses, unable to use his sword and spiritual energy to fly to the top. Collapsing upon reaching the entrance, only capable of telling his brother, his sect leader, that this child was his son, to help him, to keep him safe if something were to happen to him. Then collapsing, falling unconscious for 2 months, no one knowing if he would ever wake up. In his nightmares, Lan Wangji never woke up. In his nightmares, Lan Yongsheng was alive. He was the one to find A-Yuan, just as a clinician had found Lan Qingshan. In his nightmares, A-Yuan didn't survive, and Lan Wangji never made it back to cloud recesses. In his nightmares, he was the one wielding the whip. The sect leader could never imagine what would drive the Lan sect to use the discipline whip, and certainly not the amount of lashes it produced. He had heard the story from A-Yuan and Wei Ying. He heard about the Sunshot campaign, about Qiangqi Pass, about the burial mounds, both Wei Ying being thrown in and making it a safe haven. He heard from his son how the other sects reacted, how the Jins used Wei Wuxian as a means of driving a wedge between him and Jiang Ying, how rumors of Wei Wuxian's power and capability would drive him to desire the whole cultivation world, how there were illnesses and deaths and unexplainable things happening, all blamed on the Yiling Laosu. They believed Wei Ying capable of anything. They blamed him for everything. Wei Ying was never the one who attacked first. He was provoked, blamed, attacked, all for things he had no involvement in, things that the people he grew up with should have known he would never stoop to. There was nothing I could do to get Xiangsheng to believe me. He believed Jing Guangyao's words over mine. When I had been to the burial mounds, saw the people living there, saw that Wei Ying was doing nothing the sects were accusing him of. It was easy to blame Wei Ying. No one knew what he was capable of doing, what he wanted, desired, planned on doing. So it allowed everyone to make their own assumptions, fill in what blanks, and come to their own conclusions. Jiang Wan Ying failed Wei Wuxian, failed Wei Ying. The Jiang sect failed Wei Ying. Jiang Yanli failed Wei Ying. I failed Wei Ying. Lan Yangsheng knew what Wei Wuxian was capable of, but he also knew the character the boy had. He would never curse someone when killing them, would be more efficient. If he wanted someone dead, he wouldn't take such a backhanded way. He was kind, righteous, insightful, a genius, capable of doing whatever he set his mind to. He was willing to give as much of himself away to help those he cared for, willing to give up anything in order to remain righteous and just, willing to take on the pain of someone else just because he didn't want them being in pain. And he never complained. He never spoke about his struggles, his sacrifices, what he was giving away in order to do what he was doing. He shielded his loved ones from what Wen Chao had subjected him to, the hell he had forced the boy to experience, the choices he had made in order to survive. He pushed away those he cared about, willing to take on all his burdens and choices without dragging them down with him. Lan Yangsheng saw Wei Wuxian this way, but knew that everyone else did not. They saw him as evil incarnate, capable of unknown torture and chaos, someone who wanted to take over the cultivation world, someone who wanted to become the next Wen Rohan. Before exiting his seclusion after just a month's time, he destroyed every single whip in the Lan's possession, taking pleasure in watching them disintegrate into nothing as he poured his spiritual energy into every single one, watching as they glowed a cerulean blue before bursting into dust. The sect leader took a step forward, following the direction his son and his family were going, hearing as it took a second before his brother and son followed, each of them almost deathly quiet. Hang on. We're on a new chapter, so readjusting real quick. That's why it's cold. I'm going to take another sip of water. Chapter 2. A long-awaited, for our time travelers, confrontation with the Lan sect. The group departed Yiling, walking for 2 hours in silence before arriving at a small settlement, people and children rushing around, decorating buildings in red. The three Lans stopped behind the trio, watching as Wei Wuxian handed off A-Yuan to a young Wei boy, watching with confused amusement as the woman standing next to him scolded the Wei boy for the condition of the child's clothes, how they had just been washed and how the child looks as if he'd been playing in the dirt. Yangsheng came to the conclusion that these former Wens, now Weis, must be Wen Qing and her younger brother Wen Ning, and shortly found out his conclusion was correct, as his son turned towards the three Lans, swallowing before walking over to them. Fuqin, Shufu, Xiangsheng, He spoke in a shallow bow, standing up straight as he looked at his brother and uncle, a mixture of disappointment and anger in his gaze. Wang Ji, he heard his brother mumble, watching as said boy nodded as he turned back towards the others. Wei Ying. The Lans watched as Wei Wuxian turned towards the call of his name, a wide smile on his face as he practically ran over to the younger Lan, grabbing his hand. It was then that Kairen and Shichen gasped. The pair had taken notice of Lan Wangji's missing forehead ribbon, but never expected to see it wrapped around Wei Wuxian's wrist as the Wei entwined their fingers, dragging the Lan away from the main houses of the settlement. Eventually, the group stopped at a house a good length away from everyone else. It was quaint, small, just far enough from everything else for privacy, but close enough to still feel like part of the community. The house almost appeared similarly built to Lan buildings, part of the outer design reminding the Lans of their homes. They were led up a couple of steps before entering into the main room. As the sect leader looked around the room, he spotted his sons Guqin and sword next to what he assumed were Wei Ying's sword and dizzy. The swords and instruments looked like they belonged together, their opposing colors reflecting not only their owners, but the harmonious relationship the pair had. Lan Yongsheng also spotted various paintings done by children displayed on the walls and bookshelves. A few grass toys were strewn across one of the tables in the center of the room. The three Lans watched as Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji worked in tandem as they served them tea, each appearing to be working on independently, but never getting in the other's way, showing not only a complete trust and expectation as to how the other would move, but also showing how well they worked together without needing words. It was as if they had been working as a pair for much longer than their years would explain. The pair sat across from them after the tea had been served. Yang Shang couldn't decide whether them not knowing how to start, where to start, or simply waiting for Kairen or Shichen to speak first. Eventually, the lack of speaking got to Wei Ying as he sighed. Someone's got to have questions, right? He said as he propped his head up with his palm. Leaning against the table, Kairen glared at him. What prompted the two of you to leave without telling anyone? Kairen fumed, hands fisted in his lap as he threatened to burst a blood vessel. Ying scoffed. We did tell someone. We told Fukin. Why? Shichen looked across the table at his brother, almost unable to read the look on his face aside from anger and resentment. Emotions that had never been directed at him before. Why would you leave without telling me? Or Shufu? He quietly spoke, long-dried tears no longer threatening to fall down his face. No one would have believed us, that's why. Gong Gong is the only one who would have understood, who he knew would actually listen before jumping to conclusions. Wei Ying spoke, sitting up off the table and looking across at the two Lans. Kairen scoffed. And what would need to be believed that's so outrageous? What could cause the two of you, Wangji especially, to only inform his father and not the rest of his family or the Jiangs? Yongsheng watched as A-Ying glared at his brother, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. Zhan reached over and took one of his hands. Lan Zhan, I know we agreed to tell them, but I seriously don't see this ending well, he mumbled. Zhan sighed. They are in our home. It would be discourteous to harm one's hosts. Yongsheng watched as the pair had a silent conversation before turning back towards them. An almost resigned look in Wei Ying's eyes as he looked at the two who didn't know the truth. Lan Zhan activated a time travel talisman I created, sending us back to when we first met. The room was silent. The sect leader kept his eyes on his brother and eldest son. That's outrageous! No such talisman or array exists! Did you miss the time travel part, old man? Clearly, at the age I am now, I don't have the capabilities nor the proper cultivation to create such a talisman. But the me from, let's say, 5 years from now certainly had the time, circumstances, drive, and motivation to create such a thing. Wei Ying looked down at his hands, letting out a scoff. Certainly had the time, that's for sure. Why would you feel the need to create such a thing? Shichen spoke. His hands were in his lap. There was a droop to his shoulders as he looked across the table at his brother and Wei Wuxian. To the pair, he looked like he could believe the array had been created. It was the reason why the pair felt hesitant to explain. Yang Sheng watched as his son took a deep breath, his hand not leaving A-Ying's. The future we came from was not kind. It was filled with death, war, the murdering of innocent people due to the name they carry. It was filled with sacrifices that should have never happened, Lan Zhan, and will not be repeated. There were people lost to everyone that caused permanent damage. Relationships will never be what they were to both of us. Lan Zhan glared across the table at his uncle. Both Wei Ying and I have seen the terrible sides of our sex, what they were capable of doing when they believe themselves in the right, what they are and are not willing to do for those they are supposed to care for. Wei Ying will never have such a blind loyalty to the Jiangs. He will never choose between his own well-being and theirs. Never again will he make life-altering choices because of them, and receive absolutely nothing in return. The hand not holding Wei Ying's clenched into a fist in his lap. I have seen what the Lan sect will do when they choose to stick to the precepts, when they choose rules over what is the right thing to do. I have seen what you both are capable of doing, what you chose to do, to whom you chose to listen to, where your loyalties actually lie. The Lan sect is full of hypocrites, frauds who, at the end of the day, will protect themselves rather than defend innocent lives. There are no rules when it comes to punishment. There are no rules when it comes to listening to why an action took place. There are no rules when deciding that the words of your sworn brother are more important than your own. Wei Ying laid a hand on top of Lan Zhan's. Lan Zhan and I have both seen the atrocities the Wen sect is capable of, but the other sects are nowhere near as innocent. At least when Rohan admits when he desires strength, when he wants to rule the cultivation world, when he doesn't care what happens to others so long as he gets what he wants. Kairen and Shichen stared at the pair, their faces paling as what was said sets in. The room was quiet for a while before anyone spoke, no one knowing what to start with. Now that they were all aware of the time travel and seemed to believe it, all that was left was the specifics of what this future had been. 5 centuries. Lan Yangsheng broke the silence, looking at his youngest son, a tear falling down his face. The discipline whip has not been used in over 5 centuries. His voice was soft, almost like he was trying to soften the blow of his words. Truthfully, it was an attempt to comfort himself just as much as anyone else in the room. He still could not wrap his mind around why the whip had been used, why it had been used that many times. His son just nodded, closing his eyes as he looked down at his lap. His brother and eldest gasped, their minds connecting Azan's words and his. A-Ying's head whipped towards him, eyes burning a crimson red as he stared at the sect leader. 5 centuries, he shouted, before turning to Kairen and Shichen. You might as well have just killed him. He jolted forward, only being held back by the grip his son had on his hand, the other reaching over and cupping his face, forcing Wei Ying to look at him. I am fine. It has not and will not happen again. Of course it won't. They'll have to go through me if they want to hurt you like that again. You were bedridden for 3 months before the siege. You were in a coma for 2 months after rescuing A-Yuan. Lan Zhan, you couldn't even walk for more than a few minutes when you read the letter. He glared across the table. The entire cultivation world will burn before they even think about raising the whip against you 33 times. He spoke with a dark inflection, a voice that Lan Yongsheng could imagine belonged to the Yiling Laosu, someone fiercely dedicated to protecting those in his care. Someone who would give away parts of himself to keep those he loved safe. Someone who would defect from the sect that took him in order to protect them from being associated with him. Someone who knows how to kill someone before others can stop him. Someone who knows what it feels like to take personal gratification from torturing someone. Someone who would keep to that promise, who would make sure the sects crash and burn before harming his beloved. And a beloved who would go to the exact same extremes. You... What? All heads turned to Shichen, his voice as quiet as anyone had ever heard it. Tears were now constantly flowing down his face as he looked across the table at his little brother. A brother that from their future had been whipped 33 times, that a punishment that severe had been permitted by the sect leader, by himself. How? Who? What could have permitted such a punishment, he whispered, causing Wei Ying's anger to subside, swallowing as he looked down at his lap. Lan Zhan reached over, grabbing both of his hands, holding them as he spoke. There was war against the Wen sect. Lotus Pier fell when Chao caught Wei Ying, threw him into the burial mounds. The only way for Wei Ying to escape was to cultivate resentful energy. He heard his uncle take in a sharp breath. It was due to this cultivation that we were able to overpower Wen Ruohan and end the war. After the war, no one knew what I was capable of doing. They thought the worst of me, that since I no longer carried my sword, I was overconfident, cocky, arrogant. Then I found out that Wen Qing's family was being held in one of the prison camps, which were supposed to be punishment camps for Wen sect war criminals. She was able to escape, and we ran into each other. He let out a scoff. What was I supposed to do? Not help her find Wen Ning and her family? Her and her brother are the only reason we were able to hide after the Wens took Lotus Pier, after killing sect leader Jiang and Madame Yu. He slouched, still maintaining the grip on Lan Zhan's hand. Wen Ning was dead when we found him. Eventually, I was able to restore his consciousness as a fierce corpse, but before that, I broke everyone out of the prison camp. And let's just say the Jins and the other sects were not happy with what I had done. To them, there were no innocent Wens. They were all just as culpable for Wen Ruohan's actions. Wei Ying leaned his arms against the table, pulling them out of Lan Zhan's grasp, but feeling one wrap around his waist. I took 50 women, elderly, innocent Wens to the burial mounds. We lived there, mostly in peace, for almost the whole time we were there. Then Jin Zixuan and Jiang Yanli got married and had their son. Invited me to his 100-day celebration. Peacock's idiot cousin thought I had cursed him, so he ambushed me, trying to kill me. But only his and Jin Zixuan's death would come from it. He sat back, pushing his back towards the arm wrapped around it. And that was it. Wen Qing and Wen Ning offered themselves in exchange for the rest of the Wen's safety and for Jin Zixuan's death. But of course, the Jin sect lied. I was the next on their list. He shrugged, not bothering to continue with the story. Lin Kairin scoffed. That does not explain why Wang Ji was punished. If anything, it shows that you should have been the one being punished. He spoke, practically glaring. When Wei Ying came to avenge their sacrifice. I was really just hoping to stop their deaths, maybe collect their ashes, Wei Ying mumbled. The sects had joined together to make a pledge for Wei Ying's death. He was provoked, attacked first, and defended himself. At the time, we were not as honest with each other as we should have been. My actions without my words made Wei Ying think I was hostile towards him. He paused, turning to his beloved before he continued, receiving a small nod. It was during all the chaos that Jiang Yanli showed up. In the sect's determination to kill him, she got caught up in the fighting, pushing Wei Ying away when a cultivator was trying to kill him, ultimately dying due to the attack aimed at her brother. Wei Ying, he just watched his sister die from a sword meant for him, and he lost himself to his cultivation. He fell unconscious, and I took him away, hiding him until you both, along with 33 elders, found us. He looked up at his brother and uncle. I believe I do not need to say what happened after. Did we just let it happen? Shichen looked across the table at his brother, who refused to meet his gaze. Did any of the elders die? No, but I was not allowed to voice my mind outside of yelling. I was allowed to take Wei Ying back to the burial mounds, then was taken and immediately punished. 3 months later, the sects laid siege to the burial mounds, killing all but one of the Wens who lived there. All but one? Chiron questioned. Wei Ying could see the severity of their future weighing on the man. His face was pale, eyes wide. He looked as if he were about to pass out, ready to deem all of this a dream, some horrible nightmare his mind conjured up. A-Yuan. The child you both saw earlier, Lan Yongsheng added, watching their faces morph into shock. There was a child. You never believed my words when I spoke of the true inhabitants of the burial mounds, Lan Zhan harshly interrupted his brother. You heard my words, then immediately rushed to Jin Guang Yao, Meng Yao, and he always turned you against me. He had you convinced that Wei Ying was raising armies, preparing to destroy every sect that stood in his way. Never, even after seeing A-Yuan yourself, knowing where I had gone, did you believe me. Closed his eyes, taking in a deep breath. Azan and A-Ying came to me because they knew how you would react to their words, that you would likely not believe them, perhaps even calling for Fingmian to take A-Ying back to Lotus Pier. I feel like I do not need to tell you how deeply they care for each other, and it was the love they share that allowed the array A-Ying created to activate. Yongsheng held his head high as he looked at his brother and son. They chose to leave. They chose to tell me. They could have vanished without telling anyone, letting all of us believe something happened to them, that perhaps they were dead. He threw a hand up. Maybe one day, years later, someone would spot them wandering a street. Maybe they would have come back once the war started, unwilling to see more people die than necessary. I wouldn't blame them. Chiron looked at his elder brother in shock. You speak as if you would be completely fine with Wang Ji disappearing, never knowing why or where he had gone. He spoke, his voice soft, but due to trying to make his words comforting, but out of a sense of shock, due to everything he had heard. There was a sense of disbelief, hearing what his nephew and Wei Wuxian were saying. Chiron's mind wanted to rationalize everything, to think that somehow they were lying, that they did come from the future. It was the only explanation for his nephew's behavior, but they were exaggerating how severe it was. But the anger in his nephew's eyes as he spoke, that was all the proof he needed that they were telling the truth. The future they came from was horrific. War ravaged the sects. Wei Wuxian was condemned for protecting innocent people. That rumors and lies fueled how people thought. That no one but his nephew defended Wei Wuxian, and for that he was punished by his own clan. His own clan who did not hear him out, who actively did not believe his words, were being controlled by the words of someone else. His own sect, who raised the discipline whip against him 33 times, who did not let Wang Ji give his account, who saw a child and still believed someone else's words over his own nephew's. Zhan is not someone who would easily fall for lies and deceit. If he vanished without a trace, of course I would have worried and looked for him. But I do not think him incapable of knowing what his actions mean. Both he and A-Ying are more aware of what their actions mean, to whom they reflect upon, more than any of us. He glanced at his youngest. They are both familiar with sacrifice, and I can imagine that they would rather not be parted again. Shichen looked up. Parted? Wei Ying let out a small laugh. Almost forgot to include that I was dead for a year before Lan Zhan was able to activate the array. What? And Gyron coughed into his hand. What were the specifications for the array to activate? Why did it take a year for Wang Ji to be able to do it? He questioned, watching Wei Wuxian roll his eyes. You make it sound like it cost the lives of hundreds of people. Don't think so lowly of me. I would never make Lan Zhan do such a thing. A small smile crossed his face. It's actually quite simple. I embedded a conditional array into a letter addressed to Lan Zhan that would activate if the conditions were met. The only reason it took a year for Lan Zhan to activate it is because it wasn't actually given to him until a year after I had died. He actually activated it pretty much immediately. And Wei Ying's eyes widened as he let out a small laugh. Isn't it obvious? What else could be powerful enough to power a time travel array if not for love? I didn't want to assume what Lan Zhan thought of me, but there were instances where I thought maybe he didn't hate me as much as Jiang Cheng said he did. And I was a bit oblivious to my own feelings for a while as well. He finished, a light blush covering his face. What about your future? The one you came from? Shichen suddenly spoke, his tears gone as he looked at Lan Zhan and Wei Ying. Wei Ying looked at him. What do you mean? Does it still exist? Did it vanish entirely when you both came here? Or does it still continue as a branch of time, just without you in it? Have you just vanished from everyone there? He asked, looking the most interested as he had the entire conversation. Wei Ying hummed. I can't say for certain what happened to that future. To completely reverse time, to erase everything that happened, well, I would imagine it would cost a lot more than a simple array to do that. It's likely that it's still going on, just without Lan Zhan and A-Yuan in it. Our souls are no longer part of that timeline, so they would no longer be present or available to be contacted or summoned. He tilted his head, staring off past Lan Kairen and Lan Shichen. If I had to take a guess, in body, Lan Zhan and A-Yuan are exactly where they were when the array went off, but just no longer with their souls. The letter was spelled, so no one would be able to read it, but I can imagine someone with cultivation as strong as Zui Jun and Chifen Zun would be able to tell that some sort of array had gone off. So they would just be found, soulless, Shichen murmured. It would be a half day before they would have been found, Lan Zhan stated, looking down at Wei Ying's hand in his, watching as the other ran his thumb over his knuckles. Xiang Shang had dropped off the letter with our evening meal. He would not return until the following day to take A-Yuan to his classes, he huffed. Is it even worth thinking about what happened? We are not there anymore. What they choose to do is no longer our concern. The group sat in silence for a while, each of them thinking about what they had learned in the short while they had been there. It hadn't been what Kairen or Shichen were expecting. Time travel, war, such a horrible past. But they couldn't refute it. There were more than enough reason to think what they were saying was true. And if they were lying, it was one hell of a lie. A hand slapping on the table brought everyone back to the moment, turning our heads to Wei Wuxian. You seriously didn't leave Cloud Recesses without a sect leader present, did you? He spoke, eyes wide. A hand lightly gripped his shoulder. Wei Ying, the archery competition has not happened yet. Everyone is safe. Lan Zhan spoke softly. watching as his love slowly nodded, his shoulders dropping as he laid his forehead on Lan Zhan's shoulder. Does something happen at the competition? Chiron hesitantly asked, sighing in relief as his nephew shook his head. After a few moments, Lan Shang coughed, sitting up straight as he looked across at his brother and eldest. I believe I came here for a wedding. I hope my hosts will not mind accommodating. I believe I came here for a wedding. I hope my hosts will not mind accommodating for 2 additional people, that is, if they intend on staying. He spoke, leveling a glare at the pair. Wei Ying let out a small laugh, lifting his head up. I think Popo is already worried about making too much food. She's always saying I never eat enough. You do not. Lan Zhan, I eat just the right amount, and it is not enough. A-Yuan eats more than you. Wei Ying scoffed, crossing his arms over his chest. He's a growing boy. He needs more food. We could have barely feed him before, so now he gets to eat whatever he wants. You are also a growing boy. Wei Ying humphed, laying down on his back with a pout on his face. Lan Zhan turned to his brother and uncle. There would be no issue if both or one of you wished to stay. He poked Wei Ying's side, causing the boy to yelp and sit up. We would need to notify Wen Qing and Sishu about the change. When is the wedding taking place? Shi Chen asked, a small smile on his face. Tomorrow afternoon. Truth be told, I've had to convince Lan Zhan that eloping isn't the best idea countless times. Gong Gong offered to marry us the night we left, but I needed to make sure Qingji and her family were okay and that they were safe. Once that was established, once we had found a place to relocate them and everyone had a place where they could sleep, that was when I told Lan Zhan we could wed. He scoffed, a smile on his face. Of course, the hardest part was explaining A-Yuan. We still haven't been able to figure out just exactly who his parents are, but we have some suspicions. The Dafen Wen believed us when we spoke of time traveling. Wei Ying was able to provide information that he otherwise would have no way of knowing. We did not bring A-Yuan initially when we spoke with Wen Qing. We mentioned that we had taken in a child that was in some way related to them, and when we introduced them to A-Yuan, he was very excited to see his family again. Lan Zhan held a small smile on his face as he spoke of their son. He will be happy to see you both again as well. Shi Chen and Chiron looked quite shocked at Lan Zhan's words. A-Yuan knows us? Lan Chiron asked, eyes widening as his nephew nodded. Xiang Sheng was A-Yuan's caretaker while I was unable to. He looked down at his hands. He very much cares for you both. He likely did not recognize you earlier. Wei Ying scoffed. I wouldn't blame him. With his memories returning to him after the array activated, the aspect of seeing Qingji and Ning was more exciting for him. Wei Ying spoke, reaching forward and grabbing his refilled teacup. Returned memories. Wei Ying's head fell back in a groan. Something, after the siege he had a fever that almost killed him, something. He didn't remember anything except recognizing Lan Zhan. He briefly explained, waving a hand that was immediately caught by his Ziji. Wei Ying. Lan Zhan. Come on, the semantics and small details don't matter now, do they? Why bother explaining things that happened that no one but us remember? Lan Zhan gave him a look. Oh, okay, the important things are worth sharing, but the insignificant details? Why bother even giving them the time of day? Your definition of insignificant or mine? Wei Ying groaned, plopping his forehead on Lan Zhan's shoulder. Fine, you win, he mumbled, feeling an arm wrap around him. How did you two meet, anyway? Lan Qichen suddenly spoke, causing all heads to look at him. What? You said the array activated to send you back to when you first met. Wei Ying let out a nervous laugh. Ha 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 ha! I definitely wasn't caught by Lan Zhan sneaking up a wall of cloud recesses, 2 bottles of Emperor Smile in hand, way past curfew. Lan Zhan let out a small huff. Definitely did not attempt to bribe me either. And you definitely didn't come at me with Bichen. Unprompted. I didn't even pull Swabian out of her sheath. Wei Ying looked at Lan Zhan, a pout on his face morphing as he slowly leaned back, pressing a finger at the man. No, 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 you don't. Get that look off your face. Perhaps the wedding preparations would be better served with Mian Mian as the bride, since my current one seems to be throwing a fit. Lan Zhan leaned forward. Like a brat. The 3 Lans watched in confused amusement as at the second Jade's joke. They weren't sure who Mian Mian was, but it seemed like a point of teasing between the two, primarily from the second Jade himself. Wei Ying fell back against the floor, an arm covering his eyes. I say something one time. Once. Lan Zhan, I thought you hated me for the longest time. How was I supposed to know? I'm sure Mian Mian would make a lovely bride, but definitely not for you, he exclaimed. Wei Ying was dense. Yeah, and you bit me immediately after. A knock at the door cut off any further bickering between the two. Eyes turned towards the open door, watching as A-Yuan ran in and settled himself in Lan Zhan's lap, Wen Qing and Wen Ning standing at the entrance. Qingji, Ning! Wei Ying shouted from the floor. Wei Wuxian, you're supposed to come see me over an hour ago. Wei Qing spoke, crossing the room and grabbing the boy's arm, pulling him up to his feet. Oh, Qingji, I'm fragile. You'll be once I'm done with you. Is Ying okay? Why does he need to see you, Wei Daifu? Lan Yongsheng spoke, standing and offering a small bow to her. She scoffed. Lan Zongzhu, are you sure you'd want someone like him in your family? She sent a glare in Wei Ying's direction. He was supposed to check in with me once daily to make sure he wasn't burning through his meridians and hurting himself. By the feel of this room, he's been angry enough at least once for some resentment to flare up. She grabbed the boy by the ear. You asked me to make sure you keep yourself alive, Wei Qing spoke, ignoring the boy's claims of pain. It was just one moment, Qingji. Lan Zhan calmed me down. She just looked at him. And why, do tell, were you needing to be calmed down? Qingji, you've seen Lan Zhan's back, he mumbled, eyes turning towards the floor. The room watched as Wei Qing's anger immediately directed towards the Lans in the room, Kairin and Shichen in particular. Lan Yongsheng could practically feel the anger in her gaze as it was directed towards... Wait. His back? He spoke, his voice breaking as he looked at his son, who met his gaze, then looked down at the floor. Wei Wuxian let out a small scoff. It appears the array took back as much as it could, scars included. He opened the tops of his robe slightly, exposing a fully healed scar of the Wen sex crest. It was quite the shock to us, he spoke, tying his robe shut and placing a hand on Lan Zhan's arm. My back's quite a scene as well, courtesy of Madame Yu. He snapped his fingers, and Lan Zhan still has the Xuan Wu's ugly teeth engraved in his leg. Lan Zhan just turned to him, an expression the sect leader couldn't make out on his face. And you have one on your abdomen from... Lan Zhan, please, we've talked about this. Still does not make what happened okay. Wei Ying sighed, turning back to face the room, his eyes on Wei Qing. Qingji, Lan Laoshi, and Sui Jun would like to stay for the wedding. She nodded, turning to her younger brother, who nodded and quietly left the house. I'm sure we have extra room. Popo will be glad that there will be more people to eat all the food she's making. She glared at Wei Ying. Because some of us are still recovering from years of malnutrition and abuse from a great sect. Lan Yongsheng expected Wei Wuxian to protest, like he had done earlier with Azan, but no such thing happened. Ying simply looked down at the floor, an almost guilty look on his face. The Wei boy sighed, looking back up at her. If you say it's so, then it must be, he mumbled. Yang Sheng heard his brother scoff. So when Wan Ji says it, you protest, but when Wei Daifu says it, you accept it? Lan Kairen spoke with almost a sense of disbelief in his voice. Wei Ying let out a small laugh, wrapping an arm around his beloved's. Lan Zhan has never put the fear of gods in me. King Ji has. Trust me, Lan Laoshi. Zui Jun. You will never meet someone more terrifying than Wei Qing. He slightly leaned forward. And Lan Zhan is particularly terrifying when he's angry, but I'd take him over King Ji any day. King Ji always told Adai that she'd use her needles on him. A-Yuan spoke, a wide smile on his face as he giggled. Suan Gaga hid behind Niang Shushu a lot. The Lan stood in shock as they watched a small smile cross Lan Wangji's face, a small huff of air escaping him as Wei Wuxian buried his face in his neck. Betrayed by my own son, Wei Wuxian spoke, his voice muffled. A-Yuan's small hand reached up, patting Wei Ying's. It's okay, Adai. Baba says it's okay to tease you. Wei Ying pulled back, a small scowl on his face as he looked down at the child. I also suppose he says it's okay for me to bury you in the ground, he shouted, quickly reaching down to grab A-Yuan, walking the squealing child out the door and disappearing from their sight. Wei Qing sighed. I will tell Wei Ying he is to wash A-Yuan's clothes. Wei Qing let out a small laugh. A-Yuan tells me Wei Wuxian has done a lot of laundry consisting of only dirt-covered robes. She spoke as they followed Wei Ying outside, watching as he had knelt in an empty garden. The weather was too cold to start planting, but the area had already been designated as a small garden for the pair. Wei Wuxian said he was unsure who A-Yuan's birth parents are. Lan Laoshi would be correct. By the time Wei Ying had found us, A-Yuan was already an orphan. I would assume his parents either died in the camps my family were found in, or they died during the war. She turned away from the group, a small smile on her face as she watched A-Yuan scoop up dirt in his hands, disposing it on Wei Ying's robes. The more he grows, the more of his parents' features we will see in him. Based on his age, he would have been born at most 2 years from now. There are a few young, newly married couples we have thought could be his parents. She sighed. Wei Wuxian is the only one who knows us. We would know how we looked in the future. Likely thinking about A-Yuan's parents was not something we did. Even if A-Yuan's birth parents were to be found, any child they had would not be A-Yuan. Lan Wangji spoke, a soft look in his eyes. A-Yuan's soul exists in his body. There cannot be two of them. But any child his birth parents do have would still be his siblings. Lan Shichen spoke, eyes meeting his brother's. And any children you and Wuxian have as well. He let out a small laugh as Wanji immediately looked away, a red tint to his ears. Lan Shichen smiled as his brother excused himself, walking over to where Wei Wuxian and A-Yuan are. Shichen, Kairen, Lan Yangsheng started, his voice quiet. If either of you do anything to jeopardize their happiness, know he will not only be answering to me, but to the Dauphin Wei as well. Shichen and Kairen both felt small under his harsh gaze. They have been through enough. They did not immediately kick you two out upon your arrival. It seems they are willing to give you a chance, because you are not the versions of you they know, but you have the potential to become them. There is much they have not shared, much they likely will never share. Azan and A-Ying are not the boys everyone knows them to be. They are hardened by war, by living through horrific experiences, by death in A-Ying's case. Lan Yangsheng's eyes wandered to Wei Qing, who nodded, approving of his words. Likely, she had a set of her own for the pair as well. There is nothing they won't do to keep each other safe. If they deem anyone a threat, well, I expect that they will remain a threat for not much longer. A-Ying has been tormented and tortured by those who are supposed to care for him. A-Zhan has been tortured by those who were supposed to be righteous. The sect leader stepped in front of his eldest and brother, blocking his face from being seen by Wei Ying and Lan Zhan if they happened to look over at them. I know what you both are capable of. A-Zhan and A-Ying may not be willing to do anything to those who have wronged them, but if either of you step out of line, if I see even a hint of their future in your actions. He met both their gazes, watching as both of them took a deep breath. I will deal with you myself. Ooh. You go, Daddy Lan. And then also water sips, and we'll keep going. I'm going to be cross-eyed after reading all of this for a while, but it's such a good story, so I don't mind. Chapter 3. One more discussion before the big day. The Lans followed the couple and Wei Ying back towards the rest of the housing, now being able to take in more of the surroundings than when they initially arrived. There were at least 100 people living within the compound, within the area they have claimed as their own. A vast majority of the people were much older than the two boys they were following, most appearing similar in age to Kairen and Yang Shang as they approached the couple, greeting the pair with smiles on their faces. Lan Yangsheng could practically feel his brother and eldest son's eyes widening the more they walked. The more people they met, the more love the pair gets shown. He suppressed a laugh when they were finally shown into the receiving hall. Wei Ying looked at the Lans, a sheepish smile on his face. It's not much. We're not really expecting many visitors, but King Ji said a proper receiving area was something we needed. He scoffed, sitting down at one of the center tables in the small room. Actually, she said, what kind of sect would we be taken for if we can't even show guests hospitality? He threw his hands up. A sect? I don't know the first thing about managing people. King Ji and Popo do most of the work when we were in the burial mounds. I was on babysitting duty most days. Kept me from hiding myself away in my cave. Lan Zhan sat down next to him, A-Yuan having been handed over into Popo's care. You were the Jiang's head disciple. I was the sect heir when Xiang Shang was sect leader. We both know how to manage people and a sect. Wei Ying pouted, his lower lip jutting out. When did I become sect leader? Lan Shichen asked as he sat between his uncle and father. He watched as his brother's eyes closed, his shoulders rising in a deep breath. After the archery competition, the Wen set fire to Cloud Recesses. Fu Qin was fatally wounded. Shu Fu sent Xiangsheng away with some of the ancient texts. The Wens demanded each sect send disciples for re-education. Wei Ying scoffed, turning and glaring at the wall. And Wen Shu broke your leg. Lan Zhan nodded. I was unable to make it back to Cloud Recesses before Fu Qin. Xiangsheng showed up a few weeks later in Qinghe. Lotus Pier had already been taken. Wei Ying was missing. Wei Ying hummed, eyes narrowed as he looked out the small window. Personally, I don't think anyone hold it against me if I put that slimy scum of the lip of the cup. Maybe I could even get King Ji's help to replicate some things. Wei Ying. The dark mood immediately disappeared when Lan Zhan took Wei Ying's hand, a small smile forming on the latter's face as he took a deep breath. The Lans in the room, no matter where they stood on their complete belief in the pair's time travel story, could not deny that the pair simply balanced each other in ways they had never seen before. With no prior baseline to compare Wei Wuxian's behavior to, other than the rumors spread about the boy, they didn't know what the boy was like before the pair returned. They could, however, compare the Lan in front of them to the Lan Wangji that had existed in their memories. He was confident, sure of himself. He knew his limits and his strengths. He knew there was an air of no nonsense surrounding him. I'm glad. All heads turned to Lan Xichen, who had a smile on his face as he looked across the table at his brother. I'm glad you're okay. I'm happy to see you thriving. He paused. What you both have been through, what we have done to you, the versions of us you know, is inexcusable, a complete sham towards everything we are supposed to embody as a sect. What we allowed to happen, whether we actually knew about it or not, is something we will never be able to atone for. We will never be able to take away those moments from your lives. A tear fell down his face as his eyes met his younger brother's. I will forever be the older brother, the sect leader, who condoned and allowed such a severe punishment to happen to you, Wangji. I will forever be the brother who did not listen to your words, who believed someone else over my Didi. Our sect will forever be full of hypocrites, liars, those who wish to take the facts of others into their own hands, of those who claim to protect the innocent but will let rumors and speculation over a family of Wens allow them to be subjected to the treatment they endured. Xichen wiped away the stray tears that had fallen. I will never be the brother I was to you before you both arrived back, nor will you be the brother I knew a year ago. But I want to try to be the brother you deserve, the one who listened to you, who didn't let others cloud my judgment, who fully understood something before jumping to punishment. I don't know why this me you knew would have let such a harsh, practically deadly punishment take place. I don't know how my judgment could have been so clouded as to not understand why you were doing what you did, to not want to understand. You were a pushover, Wei Ying suddenly spoke, his eyes focused on his hand in Lan Zhan's. You sided with others, let the opinions of others tell you who you should side with. You were always so set on peacemaking, on believing the good in people like Meng Yao, but always believing the bad in me. I don't know where you stood when it came to the Dauphin Wen, but I would bet that Nai Ming Gui had a lot of sway over you, whether you realized it or not. He turned to face him. There was no reason for anyone to condone and permit what happened to the Dauphin Wen, to those who were in those camps, but we all are not as innocent as we should be. I didn't care. Alternately, I didn't really know what was going on in those meetings, and the Jin were the best off after the war. Civilians, refugees from the war, weren't something I gave a thought to. Not that I could think much about anything other than my own downward spiral after the war. It wasn't until Wen Qing found me that she told me Wen Ning and her family were in one of those camps, that they had gotten separated, that I had a reason to care. He scoffed, looking down at his clasped hand. The conditions of that camp, the amount of people who were dead. If I thought the Jin would treat people less than insects, if I had more sway among the sect leaders, if I had thought to look for Wen Qing and Wen Ning after everything had settled. You don't know if they had survived, Lan Zhan softly interrupted, reaching out to wipe away a tear that had fallen down his beloved's face. I should have at least looked, Wei Ying whispered, his voice breaking, his head hanging as he looked down. How much does A-Yuan remember? The room turned to Lan Kairen as the man spoke for the first time in a while. Everything. Wei Ying quickly turned to his Ziji with wide eyes. Not everything. He was hidden the second the sects breached the wards. He didn't see anything from the siege. Wei Ying huffed, watching as the three Lan's eyes came down from their shock. He remembers everything from the burial mounds, then in cloud recesses. He has described his memories in time in cloud recesses as fuzzy, as if something was influencing his memories from that time. We have concluded that it is simply that his memories that do not involve Wei Ying, the Wens, or myself are not as intact in his mind as the ones we are not present in. Lan Zhan looked at his father as he hummed, nodding at his words. That's why you said A-Yuan would be happy to see Shichen and Chiron, but that he likely didn't recognize them. A knock at the door paused their conversation. Wei Ying stood, dusting off his robes as he held out a hand to help Lan Zhan up. Come on, he shouted, the room watching as Wen Qing and her brother stood in the doorway. A pout immediately forming on Wei Ying's face. You knew this was part of Dafen tradition. It's just one night, Wen Qing spoke, arms crossed over her chest. Wei Ying sighed. Tradition? Wen Qing turned to the sect leader. In Dafen tradition, the night before the wedding, the pair is to be separated until the ceremony. This does exist in other traditions, but it's typically more sex-based and on the basis of women as inferior, or sometimes seen as bad luck to see the bride before the wedding. She crossed the room, grabbing Wei Ying by the arm. In our tradition, it's simply to allow for reflection. Popo has always claimed that if the couple can survive one night apart, then they will have a happy, prosperous marriage. Her eyes narrowed towards the pair. But in this case, I think it's more of a punishment, building anticipation. They can spend the rest of their second lives together. They can wait one more night. Wei Ying smiled. Popo also told me the night before is when all the elders educate the bride and groom about marital... A hand slapped over his mouth. I do not think we need to discuss any of that with you two. It's the reason your residence is much farther away from the rest of us. She spoke, glaring at him, being met with a wide smile. In an instant, Wei Ying broke out of Wen Qing's grasp. As she shouted, he rounded the table and pulled Lan Zhan close, their lips harshly connecting before pulling away. With a wide smile, Wei Ying ran out of the room, waving to the occupants as he stepped outside the threshold, Wen Qing swiftly following after him. So there are some author notes. So sorry for taking a month to update. I really just haven't been in a good headspace, and it's sucking all my drive to write. I assure you, there will not be another month between updates. The wedding is next. Thank you, everyone that has left a comment. I love seeing what you think. Also, just a part of me always enjoys seeing Len Shichen groveling for his mistakes. It wasn't what I intended this chapter to be, but I just started typing and it all came out. I like it. You did a nice job. Okay, I just need to stand for a second because... Oh. I enjoy this story. It's just long time sitting. I hope you all are enjoying the story so far. I know I am. Okay. Next chapter. Chapter 4. The highly anticipated wedding chapter, and the Lans finally go home. In the end, it was a relatively small affair. Lan Zhan and Wei Ying didn't want a big, extravagant wedding. They could have been content with just 3 bows. All right, we try this again. I'm going to just restart chapter 4 because we basically got like a paragraph in. All right, chapter 4. In the end, it was a relatively small affair. Lan Zhan and Wei Ying didn't want a big, extravagant wedding. They would have been content with just 3 bows. But the Weis insisted on holding a celebration. Rather than act as a pure wedding celebration, Wei Qing declared that it was also a celebration for their safety, their continued lives with the newly wedded couple, and as a means to show their appreciation and familial ties with them as well. The Dauphin Wen considered Wei Ying family, so much so that they would be willing to sacrifice themselves to keep the young man safe. The Dauphin Wei considered both Lan Zhan and Wei Ying as members of their family. The pair wouldn't accept being called their saviors, so sons, nephews, grandsons, cousins, etc. is what they became. Much to the pair's surprise, they were both presented with full complete sets of wedding robes by Wen Qing and Wen Ning. There were about a dozen seamstresses and clothing makers among the Wei who were all too willing to be able to participate in the making of wedding robes for the couple. It brought Wei Ying to tears as he ran his hand over the head of a phoenix embroidered along his right shoulder, being told that a matching half existed on Lan Zhan's left, that when they stood next to each other, the phoenix would look complete. Wei Ying couldn't pay much attention to anything else after his eyes met Lan Zhan's as Wei Popo walked him to the doors of the Wei Ancestral Hall, the couple continuing on inside on their own. They bowed to the tablets belonging to Wei Ying's parents as well as Lan Zhan's mother. Lan Yongsheng stated that he had already given his complete approval to the couple, that there was no need for him to be present during this stage of the wedding, and that they had already bowed before him before they left Cloud Recesses. The pair walked out of the ancestral hall with smiles on their faces. Even Lan Kairin wasn't able to stop a small smile from forming on his face, seeing his nephew radiating happiness. The newlywed couple, as expected, did not stick around for celebrations for longer than what was necessary, and no one was going to stop them. They were fully expecting to not see the couple for at least a week after the ceremony. Unfortunately for them, the Lans needed to return back to Cloud Recesses, so they had to take a brief break from their honeymoon. Will you two ever come back to the sex, even to announce that you are not dead? Lan Kairin spoke to the pair, forced to resign himself to the fact that his nephew is no longer the person he knew, that if he wanted to remain in their lives, he needed to at least accept that. Wei Wuxian hummed. A-Yuan hummed from his position wrapped around his father's leg. I can't imagine us not being dead will remain a secret for much longer. You 3 were all spotted in Yiling only a few days ago. No doubt rumors have already started spreading. He let out a soft laugh. I would say Nai Huaisang definitely knows we're alive. Not that we're married, but definitely that we're alive and have a child. Nai Huaisang? Lan Kairin looked appalled at the suggestion. He may not perform well during the lectures, Lan Laoshi, but he is very smart and resourceful when it comes to gathering information. Lan Zhan hummed. He knew about Jin Rulin's birth before the other sects were informed. He turned to his husband, before even Jiang Wan Ying knew. Wei Ying rolled his eyes as he scoffed. I'd imagine the second Jiang Wan Yin finds out, 1, I'm alive, and 2, that I'm close to Yiling, I can imagine him storming over here demanding to speak with me. Likely thinking he holds the power and authority to drag me back to Lotus Pier. That will not end well for him, Lan Yongsheng spoke, walking over to the group with Lan Shichen. Wei Ying shrugged. He'll come at me with verbal threats, thinking that I'm easy to wear down and manipulate. Let's hope he doesn't draw his sword. I don't think I would be able to hold Lan Zhan back from causing the death of a sect heir. Wei Ying spoke, a small smile on his face. He will not harm you. Of course he won't. Not with you around. And even with you around, I can easily take him down if I need to. He spoke, leaning into Lan Zhan's side, feeling an arm wrap around his waist. We appreciate being allowed to stay and bear witness to your union, Wang Ji, Wuxian. Lan Shichen spoke, falling into a bow. Lan Kairen soon followed after. And for sharing information about your future and your experiences. You both did not have to tell us anything. Knowing what I know now, I could not fault you if you had immediately turned us away. Shufu, Xiangsheng, you are not them. Well, the capability to become them exists. Now that you know, I feel assured that your future mistakes will not be repeated. Lan Zhan's eyes drift towards his father. I would also assume Fukin has spoken to you both as well about any potential repetition and the consequences if anything were to happen once more. Wei Ying let out a laugh as he leaned down to pick up A-Yuan. Outside of the Dauphin Way, you three are the only ones who know not only what happened to us, but about the future. So if anything happens to get out, we know where to look. His eyes darted between Lan Kairen and Lan Shichen. You two know the bare minimum of the future we escaped from. You will never know the full extent, as it isn't something either of us would wish for anyone to know, but we will absolutely try to prevent the bloodshed we have experienced from happening again. You already have, Sect Leader Lan smiled at the couple. Not only by saving, renaming, and relocating the ways, but by sharing information with me that allowed me to start planning, fix mistakes, and make allies for what is to come. Wei Ying sighed. Despite wanting to completely leave the cultivation world to fend for itself, he eyes Lan Zhan. We both hold too high a sense of justice to allow for unnecessary death. You are the one who suggested speaking with Fuqin when you said we could vanish. Yeah, and sometimes I regret it. Just imagine completely vanishing. We'd become urgent legends at some point, Wei Ying joked, receiving half a glare from his husband. What do you regret? Lan Shichen spoke. Wei Ying turned to look out at the small village that they had created, slightly holding A-Yuan closer to him. It's all the what-ifs that cross my mind. I think about what if we had stayed, gone through everything how we were supposed to. If I had played the role the Jiangs wanted me to. Would we have been able to protect the people we care about if we had stayed? Would it have been easier? Could we have prevented as much as we can now if we had stayed? Is there more we aren't able to stop because we left? He paused, turning to look back at the lawns. I spent far too much time thinking about what could have gone differently when we were settled in the burial mounds. I've ran over scenarios in my head hundreds of times, changing my actions, others' actions, my words, speaking when I didn't, changing what I spoke, thinking about my behavior, if behaving differently would have changed what people thought about me. Ultimately, I realized that the time we came from, none of that mattered after Wen Chao threw me into the burial mounds and I cultivated resentful energy to survive. No one was going to change what they thought about me, just when they spoke about those thoughts. The negative thoughts everyone had about me during the war only remained thoughts until the war was over and when Ruohan dead. I would have always helped Wen Qing, always would have rescued the Wens and taken them to the burial mounds. Every single decision I made, I would have made again because it was the right thing to do. And that is what always matters. He turned to Lan Zhan, a sad smile on his face. I don't think even you, dear husband, could have done anything that would have helped. And I know you wanted to. I wouldn't have accepted your help. I didn't want to drag anyone down with me in my decisions. I couldn't be the reason people started talking badly about you. Wei Ying watched a glimmer of sadness flicker across his husband's eyes before Lan Zhan nodded. I had not lost you. That is when everything truly changed, he whispered. a hand reaching out to wipe away the tear falling down Wei Ying's face. And now it is up to us to be making these changes for you. Lan Yongsheng started, almost startling the others. You were teenagers. Are teenagers. You told me you came to me because I had the power to change things. Things no one would have let you change given your ages. He looked at his younger brother and eldest son. We will prevent the future you have experienced. We will make the world one you two would be proud to live in, and we will be able to do this because of your experiences and your genius mind, A-Ying. Gong, gong, Wei Ying whined. You were the one who designed the array that sent you three here, whether you meant for A-Yuan to be here or not. I have not shared what you have been sending me with the elders, but on the few night hunts I have led, your inventions have saved lives. If you are as capable as you are now, given your few years and having spent a portion of those without a golden core, I cannot wait to see what you accomplish with your current knowledge and a core. Yongsheng spoke, a smile on his face as he watched his son-in-law hide behind his youngest, pressing his face into his back. The three Lans left shortly after with promises of visiting in the future and wishes for avoiding the future the two men came from, as well as with more talismans and arrays that were immediately going to be implemented, not only in cloud recesses, but in the unclean realm. It took 3 months, 2 months longer than Wei Wuxian had anticipated, for any backlash from the three Lans being spotted in Yiling to rise. And it came in the form of purple robes and a scowl, standing in the middle of the market in the heart of Yiling. All right, so here are our notes for this chapter. You know, I really didn't mean to take so long to update. I only had time to now because I have finally caught up with my homework and had a moment to finally write. Thank you to those who have stuck around, and thank you for all the comments and kudos. I really love reading your responses. Next chapter, an angry grape appears. Oh-ho-ho! I know who's coming. Okay. We pop this down. Chapter 5. Truly an angry purple grape. Wei Ying knew it was coming. He knew that once the greater cultivation world found out that he and Lan Zhan were in fact still alive, that the questions would come. The Weis, whether out of gratitude for their saviors or a want to protect themselves, had never named their saviors or benefactors when those in Yiling asked. The few stalls he and Lan Zhan frequented, the occasional Yunmeng stall owner Wei Ying knew, the people who lived in Yiling, none of them ever spread rumors. If they recognized either of them, they never said. But three Lans showing up in Yiling, the sect leader, his brother, and the heir, that would cause rumors to spread. Rumors that would have their names attached to them, ones that anyone would be able to make the connection between Qing Hang Jun and his family showing up in Yiling randomly and leaving with two young men. He knew this was coming, yet seeing Jiang Ying was something he wasn't expecting, something he hadn't thought about, what his reaction would be, what Lan Zhan's reaction would be. Wei Ying had had plenty of time to think about the Jiangs, to think about the childhood he had practically stolen from him, the near constant punishments Madame Yu had given him, whether he had actually done anything wrong or not. He had so much time to think about it all, but he had never thought about how he would feel when he saw them again. They spotted him first. Jiang Yin was alone, by himself, as he practically stormed into Yiling. Wei Ying and Lan Zhan had just finished the extra shopping they needed to do. Wen Qing needed additional medical supplies because of an upcoming birth. It was just out of the corner of Wei Ying's eye that he spotted Purple, having spent his entire life in Lotus Pier memorizing that the different of purple meant in order to avoid Madame Yu. The second he saw that shade of purple, he knew Jiang Wanyin had finally arrived. The Jiang hadn't spotted them yet. While the pair typically wore their signature colors when around the Weis, when they went into Yiling, they often changed into attire that would be more fitting for commoners, something that wouldn't show off too much status or reveal themselves, and they hid their swords as well. Wei Ying felt the moment Lan Zhan spotted Jiang Wanyin as the hand he was holding tightened, Lan Zhan stepping closer to his husband almost involuntarily. "Wei Gonzi?" a voice whispered. Wei Ying's head turned towards a young woman who stood behind a stall of paper and straw animals. "You and Lan or Gonzi can hide in the back of my stall until Jiang Gonzu leaves if you so wish." Wei Ying felt a small smile cross his face at her offer. She was someone that they had been coming to for toys for A-Yuan ever since they arrived. Wei Ying could almost guess that she or someone in her family had been running the stand when he and Lan Zhan had met in Yiling with A-Yuan back in their future. It was no surprise to him that she knew who they were. He practically felt like everyone in Yiling knew who they were before the rest of the cultivation world did. That won't be necessary, but thank you for the offer," he whispered back, eyes flickering back out towards where the Jiang stood. "Things might get a little ugly. Maybe you should close early for the day? Or at least until he leaves. This one will heed your advice, Wei Gonzi." Wei Ying sighed as he leaned his head onto Lan Zhan's back. "Wei Ying, should we just get this over with? He's going to have a lot of bullshit to spew, and I'm going to try not to gut him where he stands." He felt Lan Zhan hum. "Will not let him hurt Wei Ying again. The Jiangs never deserved you." Wei Ying couldn't help but fall even more in love with the man. He sighed, reaching around and linking their arms together. "Let's get this over with. The people of Yiling will have our backs if it gets violent." Jiang Wanyin spotted them almost immediately. The pair tried to lead the Jiang away from the main square to avoid having as many witnesses to what they knew would be vile words and pure insults, potentially even deteriorating into physical violence. Lan Zhan grabbed the Jiang before he could touch Wei Ying. "So it is true! You righteous Lans are nothing more than corrupt thieves. Lan Wangji, you must truly have disappointed your sect if they haven't even tried to drag you back to that mountain. No doubt they would never let you leave again once you were there." Jiang Wanyin yanked his arm out of Lan Zhan's grasp before pointing it at Wei Ying. "And you traitor! How dare you vanish from the lectures and disgrace the Jiang sect? Do you know how worried Aji has been? Mother and father have done nothing but yell at each other every single day since your stunt. Wei Wuxian, how dare you act this way after everything the Jian sect has done for you, everything my family has done for you? You wouldn't even be alive if it weren't for..." Lan Wangji's fist collided with Jiang Wanyin's face, throwing him back. Dust plumed in the air as Jiang Wanyin looked up at the pair from his new position on the ground, a dark bruise already starting to form on his face as blood slowly dripped from his nose. "Lan Wangji, how dare you!" Yes. How dare Lan Zhan defend his husband from someone who was attempting to attack him? Wei Ying took a step towards Jiang Wanyin. How dare Lan Zhan punch someone who clearly held intent to cause harm? How dare you, Jiang Wanyin, to attack an heir to the Lan sect and his beloved? How dare you come into Yiling and treat those here with disrespect, treating them as if they should be feeling grateful to have you in their presence? Wei Ying glared down at the Jiang. "I don't understand what you mean when you say I wouldn't be alive without you. That I owe this massive debt to Yumen Jiang for taking in a child from the streets and providing the bare minimum in terms of housing, food, education. Everything I have ever done within the walls of Lotus Pier has been due to my own strength, my own will. I owe you and your family nothing. I owe your mother nothing. Do not attempt to guilt me into feeling bad for stating I made Jiang Yanli cry. Do not try to convince me that I'm supposed to feel indebted to the people who took me in when I had been doing just fine by myself on the streets for 5 years. Jiang Yin, if your father truly cared about me, if he truly cared about my father, my mother, please, do tell me why it took him such a long time to actually find me. Jiang Yin finally scrambled back up to his feet, strands of his hair falling out of his hairpiece. Wei Wuxian, do not disgrace my mother and father's names. You would have died on those streets. Maybe you should have. It certainly would have made my life so much easier. You have done nothing but take up resources and time from everyone in Lotus Pier. The room you live in, the food you eat, the clothes you wear, the time you spend training, everything is because of me and my sect. Took a step closer to Wei Wuxian, his foot slamming onto the ground. Maybe it's a good thing you've turned out the way you have. Seems like traitors truly flock together. But you belong to me. Everything that you are belongs to the Jiang sect. Every single breath you take is because you are allowed to do so. Because I allow you to. Wei Ying didn't even attempt to stop Lan Zhan as his fist, once again, knocked Jiang Yin off his feet and throwing him back about 20 feet. He did, however, stop his beloved from pulling Bai Chen out of her sheath. You do not get to speak of Wei Ying as if he is cattle for you to sell or slaughter whenever you desire. You do not get to assume yourself as the superior in this situation when both Wei Ying and I outrank you, Jiang Yin. There is nothing you are going to do, nothing you are capable of doing, to convince Wei Ying that he is to drag himself back to Lotus Pier where he will be beaten, mistreated, used, and considered as lesser in the eyes of everyone within Lotus Pier's wall. Bai Chen sang as she was pulled out of her sheath. If you even think about taking Wei Ying by force, you will not survive such an attempt. Jiang Yin, either because he was too dumb or too arrogant, didn't see Lan Wangji's threat for what it was. But the Jiang truly didn't know how capable Lan Wangji was. Han Guanjun's aim never strayed. Much like Wei Ying, if he wants someone dead, they'll be dead. Jiang Yin let out a laugh. Wei Wuxian, just wait until Mother finds out where you are. I may not have come prepared enough to drag you back to where a servant's son belongs, but you will never be able to deny Mother. What she says goes. There'll be no arguing with her. A smirk crossed the Jiang's face. I've heard her speaking with Madame Jin about having a few new friends around Lotus Pier to help with patrolling, keeping everyone where they're supposed to be. Wei Ying didn't satisfy the Jiang with a response to his taunting. His fear of dogs will always be something that he will struggle with, but it was by far the worst thing he had experienced in his years. Dogs would never compare to the feeling of being bitten, torn, ripped apart by fierce corpses. When it became obvious that Jiang Yin's threats weren't working as they used to, he huffed as he stood, sorry about that, glaring at Lan Wangji the entire time. I don't know what this traitor has told you, what twisted words and lies have spewed out of his whore mouth. Ooh, sorry about that. I don't know what he has done to convince you and your family that you should be treating him with anything resembling respect, Jiang Yin spat out. He's nothing more than my family's possession. He belongs to the Jiang sect. And if the Lan clan is set on protecting him, then prepare to defend your actions under sword point. Jiang Yin turned to walk away, shoving past a few people as he neared the entryway that led into Yiling. The pair let him get outside of the city boundaries, let him walk a few minutes, before actually confronting him. Wei Ying let out a sharp whistle, making Jiang Yin pause before attempting to turn around, then finding that he couldn't move at all. Unseen to his eyes, but entirely visible to Wei Ying, a spirit had wrapped itself around the Jiang, completely restricting all of his movements. Jiang Yin attempted to open his mouth, panicking momentarily before glaring at Lan Wangji, who now stood in front of him. Now, Jiang Yin, it is our turn to speak. Wei Wuxian walked around the Jiang, moving to stand next to his husband. I feel as though you do not know the very rules of the clan you belong to. Don't worry, I'm more than willing to teach you. He pointed his dizzy at him. According to Jiang clan rules established by the generation after the Jiang clan was established, an individual who is a member of the Jiang clan cannot go longer than 6 months without being present in Lotus Pier and fulfilling their duties. Failure to comply with such a rule is immediate expulsion and defection of the disciple, with no chance to appeal that decision for at least 3 years. Wei Ying took a deep breath before meeting the Jiang's gaze head-on. The second the 6-month period is past, the second I had been missing from the Lan sect lectures, not fulfilling the role I was supposed to be filling as a disciple of the Jiang sect, I should have been expelled. He let out a small laugh. You may think, Jiang Yin, that my loyalty to your family will trump any other decision I have ever made in my life. That I feel as if I owe you and your family everything. That I would lay down my life, the very core that resides within me, for you and your clan. He pushed Jiang Yin to his knees, digging his nails into the purple-clad shoulders. Nothing you could do would ever make me feel as though I am lesser, because I am not under the protection of the Jiang sect, that I should feel ashamed for my actions when I am no longer part of the Jiang clan. Actually, if anything, I am under the protection of the Lan clan, so anything you do to me, you should expect the full wrath in retribution. He hummed before turning towards Lan Zhan. I'm not missing anything, am I, Lan Zhan? The wide smile on his face immediately calmed any anger Lan Wangji held. Any grievances the Jiang clan has should be directed to Lan Zhangzu. To attempt to solve their own hypothetical problems without proper approval will only result in ramifications I do not think the Jiang clan would be willing to shoulder. Just because he could, Lan Wangji walked closer to Jiang Yin and kicked him, the Jiang's body hitting the ground in a solid thump. You could tell Jiang Yin, if not entirely restrained, would have immediately attacked him. Lan Wangji almost wished he had. Wei Ying linked their arms together, giving Jiang Yin one final glare. If you ever are in Yiling again, Jiang Yin, I do hope that we do not encounter each other again. It would be rather unfortunate if you were to encounter Lan Zhan by yourself. I cannot guarantee what would become of you otherwise. He shrugged. Of course, in any scenario, I would take my husband's word over yours, over anyone else's. Wei Ying let out a small laugh. All right. Lan Zhan and I are married, with full support of the Lans who know and of our own. I don't care who you tell. It wasn't a secret anyway. Oh, and the silencing spell will wear off in 3 weeks. Lan Zhan's modified the spell to make it last as long as he wants. He wanted to silence you forever, but I didn't think that was a wise choice. The body-locking spell will wear off in 24 hours. He waved back as the pair walked away. Have fun. Lan Zhan and Wei Ying walked back towards Yiling, arms linked, as they heard Jiang Ying screaming at them through his sealed mouth. Okay, so the notes for this chapter say, so terribly sorry for taking so long to update. I've been busy with schoolwork, and I'm nearing the end of the semester, so I hope to have more time to write. Thank you so much for reading. Thank you so much for listening. We've got 2 more chapters. I'm excited. 3 more. Sorry. Chapter 6. Hang on. Quick sippy sip, then we're going to keep going. Chapter 6. Lan Yongsheng was fighting off his 3rd headache of the day, this one having been named A-Yuan. The first was Jin Guangshan, the second Wen Ruohan, but A-Yuan was the strongest competitor. He was almost begging for something to happen that would make Madame Yu's voice stop. He thought about silencing her, but that wouldn't fit the decorum belonging to a sect leader, plus the whole room would have known it was him. Just as he was about to curse the sects again for continuing to let the woman talk for as long as she had been, Yongsheng had long forgotten what issue she had even brought up initially. The doors to the room slammed open to reveal a disheveled Jiang Yin. The boy's eyes scanned the room before landing on the lawns, practically storming over with steam shooting out of his ears as he slammed a piece of paper onto the table in front of him. "Remove the damn silencing spell Lan Wangji put on me!" Lan Yongsheng had to quickly cover his laugh with a cough into his sleeve. "Ah Chang, why are you here? What's going on?" Jiang Fingmian spoke as he rose and crossed the room towards his son. Jiang Wanyin only pointed at the lands, then his mouth, steam practically fuming out of his ears as his face only turned more and more red. "Yongsheng, what's going on?" With a quick cough to cover his residual laughter, Lan Yongsheng rose to his feet and met the gaze of Jiang Fingmian, the best apologetic look on his face. "Ah, it appears your son has encountered mine, and Azan has left him with..." "Did Lan Wangji silence my son?" His third headache spoke, Zidian crackling in the now quiet room, before the sect leaders all started murmuring about Lan Wangji, how they'd all assumed he was dead. "It appears, Madam Yu, that Wangji has placed a modified version of the silencing spell on Jiang Wanyin. I'm afraid that since I am not my youngest, nor do I know the specifics as to what he altered within the spell, that the only option is for it to simply run its course for how long Azan has set it for." He eyed Jiang Wanyin. "I assume you know how long that is, Jiang Gonzi?" "Wait," sect leader Jin started. "Yongsheng, are the rumors about Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian being alive and in Yiling true then?" With the name Wei Wuxian being spoken, two heads turned towards the Lan group. Lan Yongsheng being met with a death glare and a look from Jiang Fingmian that appeared entirely fake and filled with a sense of betrayal. It was in that moment that Lan Yongsheng remembered the lengthy correspondence with Jiang Fingmian about Wei Wuxian's disappearance. "Guangshan, what rumors are you speaking of?" Jiang Fingmian spoke, turning to watch as Jin Guangshan opened a fan and covered what Yongsheng knew was a wide smirk. "Oh, Jiang Xiang, I only heard whispers from servants, but it appears that both Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji were spotted in Yiling." Guangshan's eyes flicked towards him, "as well as Lan Zongsu, Lan Kairen, and Lan Shichen. Servants say that the Lans followed the two out of Yiling." The room was quiet as practically everyone turned and looked at Lan Zongsu. Lan Yongsheng did not gratify Jin Guangshan's stupid interest in watching within-clan fighting for his own morbid gratification, so he maintained a passive look as he lifted his cup and took a long drink. Could feel Jiang Fingmian's eyes on him the whole time, and had the clear thought that he should have brought Kairen with him so he would not be facing a room of sect and clan leaders on his own. But he would do anything for his sons. "Those rumors are true, Jian Zongzu. I have been in contact with my sons since the night of their disappearance, and I can assure you that they did leave on their own volition, and nothing was pressuring them to leave and hide themselves." Jiang Fingmian's hand slammed against the table. "You told me you had no idea where they were, that you had no idea where A-Yuan was or where Lan Wangji could have gone. Are you telling me you lied?" Lan Yongsheng faced Jiang Fingmian's glare head-on, feeling as if he was finally seeing the Jiang Fingmian who would tell A-Ying that he needed to protect Jiang Wanyin with his life rather than say anything to reassure the teen. No, this was the Jiang Fingmian who brought the son of Wei Chengxi and Conks Chanks Sanren into his home, then proceeded to let his wife discipline the boy in any way she deemed, for anything she deemed was his fault. "Fingmian, I was simply abiding but what their wishes were. Azan and A-Ying didn't want anyone knowing where they were going, why they left, and when they'd come back." He held his head high as he faced both Jiang Zongzu and the violet spider's glares. "Yes, I did lie to you. I lied to my brother, my eldest, my entire clan, the entire cultivation world, and I would do it again." The flash of Zidian flew across the room before anyone was able to draw their swords, attempting to protect themselves. Smoke filled the room as the purple whip made contact A-Yuan almost screaming in frustration as she was unable to recall the whip back to her person. Madam Yu, I would think an unprovoked attack towards another clan leader would be something even you would never stoop to. A voice spoke from within the smoke. The smoke dispersing to reveal a black and red clad youth, a sword and dizzy at his hip and the end of Zidian clutched in his hands. Wei Wuxian! Yuan shouted, infusing more energy into Zidian, her anger slowly disappearing when Zidian continued to be held in Wei Wuxian's hand. Gong Gong, are you okay? Must have said something quite rude for Madame Yu to attack you. Wei Ying said, directing a smile behind him toward the Lan clan leader. I'm all right, A-Ying, though everyone else is a bit angry that I lied for so long. Yang Shang spoke with a small smile in his voice. Wei Ying let out a small laugh. Well, Gong Gong, you can't expect them to take a Lan of all people lying. It's just another trivial matter. 3,000 rules, you know. A-Xian? Wei Ying turned back towards the room, his eyes landing on Jiang Fingmian and Madame Yu. Jiang Zongzu, Yu Furen, he spoke, dipping into a shallow bow. A-Xian, what's been going on? Why did you disappear? Why is Lan Zongzu saying he lied for you and Lan Wangji? You've never met the boy before. Why would you disappear with him? Madame Yu attempted to pull Zidian out of his grasp. You ungrateful brat! First you run away from the Lan lectures and disgrace the Jiang sect, and now you dare to address Lan Zongzu as Gong Gong? How utterly shameless can you be? She shouted, Jiang Fingmian grabbing her arm as she tried walking around the small table towards Wei Ying. Lan Yongsheng looked up at A-Ying, watching as his face fell entirely expressionless, rivaling even A-Zan's more apathetic looks. He only looked across the room at the Jiangs with pity, not a single ounce of familial respect for the pair. No, he looked angry, mad, furious. If Yu Furen was aware of the Jiang sect's procedures towards disciples who abandoned their post, then she should know that at the moment it had been 6 months since my disappearance, I was no longer a member of the Jiang sect. Therefore, unable to disgrace the Jiang sect as you claim I have. Apparently, your son also is not aware of these procedures, as I had to explain them to him. He looked at Lan Yongsheng, who was now standing by his side, flashing him a smile. And I refer to Lan Zongzu as Gong Gong because he is Yu Furen. My marriage to Lan Wangji was finalized a few weeks ago, actually. Would have been much sooner, but we had some things we needed to do first. Wei Ying spoke, his eyes drifting towards the front of the room, where Wen Ruohan sat next to Jin Guanshan, even slightly dipping into a shallow bow. I send my regards, Wen Zongzu, about your niece and nephew and their family. Wei Ying was unable to conceal his smirk as the cup in Wen Ruohan's hand smashed. Wei Wuxian, release Zidian at once! Yu Yuan's grating voice crossed through Yang Zongzu's ears once more, truly trying to achieve first place in the headache competition. Wei Ying's eyes dramatically widened as he pulled his hand closer to him. Of course, Madame Yu. The room watched as Wei Wuxian's eyes briefly flashed red as a coil of black and red energy spiraled down the purple whip, joining together where the ring sat on Yu Yuan's hand, before shattering into a million pieces and falling off her hand. Wei Ying smirked as the woman shrieked, spewing insult after insult towards the Wei as she lunged over the table and ran towards him, barely able to avoid the sharp sword that almost pierced through his chest. Lan Zhan, I was wondering when you'd arrive. Needed to settle A-Yuan for a nap. He nodded his head towards his father. Fuqin. A-Xian. The room turned towards a stunned Jiang Fingmian, his hands and fists at his side. What is going on? Why did you leave? You're married? A-Xian, you're too young. Why would you leave your position? Why would you leave Ah Chang and Ali alone in the cloud recesses? Why? Why would I leave their position as a shield and protector? Why would I leave the spot in Lotus Pier that only brought me pain, abuse, a terrible future? A position that would never allow me to have my own future. I was supposed to dedicate my life to Jiang Wanyin, wasn't I? Wei Ying narrowed his eyes, glaring at the Jiang. My future, Jiang Fingmian, was to be Jiang Wanyin's servant. I am, was, and will never be a brother to your son, a brother to your daughter, nor a nephew to you. I don't know what you thought you were to my father, but I can assure you that if Wei Chengxi knew how you were treating me, how you planned to treat me, that he would have risen from the dead and done right by me. Wei Wuxian took a step forward, eyes flickering towards Madame Yu, who still stood with Bi Chen inches from her chest, then towards a fuming Jiang Wanyin, who looked as if he were moments away from charging at anyone he deemed a threat. He felt a hand on his arm, turning to meet a small smile on Lan Yangsheng's face. Wei Ying took a deep breath, then turned back towards the Jiangs and the rest of the room. To answer your question, Jiang Zhangzu, myself and Lan Wangji left for one simple reason. We both realized how the entire cultivation world was corrupt, unjust, unrighteous, and full of liars who only care about themselves. We met the night we disappeared, and we knew that if we were to pursue the loving relationship we both intended, we had fallen into, that no one would support us. He flashed a smile towards his father-in-law. Lan Wangji and I spoke with Lan Zhangzu before we left, as he was one of the only people we knew would understand the lengths one would go for love. Wei Ying turned towards the head of the room, toward Jin Guanshan and Wen Ruohan. It is certainly a matter of time before someone like Wen Zhangzu or Jin Zhangzu decides that their current positions within the hierarchy are not to their satisfaction and starts to take over smaller clans, ultimately leading towards full-out war. When that happens, I sure hope, Jiang Zhangzu, that you will hold higher concerns than a teenager to whom you brought into your home under the guise of being a favor to your friends, only to then not care about said child, surrender any punishment to your wife who took out her anger towards a dead woman on her son, and then continue to claim to be close to my parents, yet not share a single piece of information of them with me. Wei Ying felt his husband softly grab his hand, intertwining their fingers, some of his anger dispersing at the touch. Taking a deep breath, Wei Ying met Jiang Fingmian's gaze head-on. To make it simple for you, Jiang Zhangzu, I got tired of being treated like a servant when everything had indicated that I wasn't. I got tired of your lies, of your empty words, of your continued insistence of being my uncle, yet continuing to allow me to be abused, starved, and treated like a training dummy under your roof. Just as Wei Wuxian expected, Jiang Fingmian only stood with his mouth opening and closing like a fish. His non-confrontational mind, unable to find a way to respond to his words in a way that would make the words Wei Wuxian had spoken any less damaging to the Jiang sect. Also, just as he expected, Jiang Wanyin finally had enough and charged across the room, Sendu unsheathed and charging straight towards Wei Wuxian. With barely a flick of his wrist in the Jiang's direction, Sendu flew into the ceiling and shattered upon impact with the stone ceiling of the room, the hilt and blade fragments raining down on Jiang Wanyin as his face grew more and more red, unable to scream out what he wanted to. For a moment, the room was silent, before erupting into shouting. Wei Ying simply rolled his eyes through a glare towards a select few in the room, Jiang Wanyin, Jiang Fingmian, Wen Ruohan, Jiang Guanshan, before tightly holding onto his husband's hand and reaching for Yang Zhang's, activating a talisman in his sleeves and vanishing from the room before the sect and clan leaders would break out into an all-out fight. Oh boy, I think we're wrapping it up. Okay. 2 chapters left. Chapter 7. Wei Ying looked around the room, his eyes darting from shelf to shelf, looking at all the things Lan Zhan had left behind. He knew Lan Zhan only took what he deemed necessary, likely leaving behind things that, despite loving, were not as worth taking as something else. He'd only been inside the Jingxi for a few minutes the night they left, but now with free reign over his husband's former living space, he didn't want to overlook anything. There was a fine layer of dust on some of the shelves. Others looked like they had been dusted recently. Lan Yongsheng mentioned that he did tend to the gardens and space surrounding the Jingxi. With a sigh, Wei Ying flopped onto the bed, a distant scent of sandalwood still stuck to the blankets. It had been a month since the discussion conference, since the cultivation world found out that Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian were still alive, that they were married, that sect leader Lan knew the entire time where they had gone and had been in constant contact with them the entire time, going so far as to lie to the other sect leaders, to members of his own family, to Wei Ying's family. There had been some backlash, mainly coming from the Jiangs, resting primarily on the sudden disappearance coupled with the harsh words directed at sect leader Jiang, Madame Yu, and Jiang Wanyan. Wei Ying had teleported the three of them to cloud recesses as they escaped the conference, so thus they had to deal with the entirety of cloud recesses, finding out their second young master Lan was, in fact, alive, and his father knew where he was the entire time. The elders weren't happy, but when were they ever? It was interesting, from Wei Ying's perspective, to have the Lans, who he knew abhorred him, call for his death, condemned him for so-called demonic cultivation, not be angry with him. The shock of having such a high-ranking member of the Lan clan willingly lie for over a year to his entire clan must have taken all the blame and attention away from Lan Zhan and Wei Ying, the ones who actually ran away from their clans. The pair's time travel still remained a secret for those who didn't The pair's time travel still remained a secret from those who didn't already know, and to reveal it to anyone else was essentially a recipe for disaster. The Lan elders didn't have a problem with Wei Wuxian, the almost 17-year-old who ran away and eloped with Lan Wangji. Then they certainly would take issue with 22-year-olds living in the burial mound, so-called Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, Yiling Laosu. At the moment, his lovely husband was speaking with the elders, something about them wanting an account from Lan Wangji himself without any potential outside influences. If they were hoping that Lan Zhan had been coerced, roped into a larger scheme that he would reveal the second he was alone with those who were supposed to have his greatest interest at heart, they'd be entirely wrong, probably disappointed. Not only would they have to deal with the fact that their sect leader knew where his missing son was the whole time he was missing, but they're having to face the fact that Lan Wangji was not entirely defiant towards them, but was also a married man, no longer a playing chip on their board, a way for them to gain additional resources by arranging a marriage in his name. Madame Yu, however, was vehemently denying their union. According to her, Wei Wuxian was still a member of the Jiang sect. He was still someone under their jurisdiction. He was still someone she had control over. Apparently, long-held clan procedures were no match for Madame Yu, who could decide who was under her rule and when they were allowed to leave. Well, her words would do nothing against the public declaration Wei Ying had made, and with the backing of Lan Zongzu as well. There would be little to nothing Madame Yu could do to force Wei Wuxian back to Lotus Pier, back under her harsh whip, her heavy punishments, her relentless targeting. Time passed. Eventually, the news that Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian were not dead and were married were no longer the talk of the cultivation world. No, they had much larger things to worry about. Mainly, the one sect and their attempt to climb for power. Wei Ying hadn't thought much about the changes that they had made simply by not being involved, but when the news that Jin Zixuan and Jiang Yanli were be married by the end of summer, he realized that he wasn't in cloud recesses during the lectures, so their betrothal was never broken. Both he and Lan Zhan hadn't been present during the archery competition, so they hadn't placed. Wei Ying hadn't been there for Wen Chao to target and provoke. Lan Shichen had managed to place first, Jin Zixuan second, Jiang Wanyan third, and a mix of Nai, Lan, and Jiang and Jin filling out the places all until 13th, where the first Wen disciple had placed. When they found out how the placements went, there was an uneasy feeling in both their chests, and they immediately made a trip to cloud recesses. The wards that Lan Yongsheng had put into a place after Lan Zhan and Wei Ying had left were able to deter the Wen army that came, along with his foresight of knowing that they could come after the archery competition. The Wens never stood a chance once Wei Ying joined the fight. His course sung in his chest as he wielded Swabian, cutting down Wen after Wen. Lan Zhan right behind him, covering his back as the pair made their way towards Wenshu. It was only right that Lan Zhan got the chance to kill him. Wenshu was the one who had burned his home, killed his father, and broke his leg. It felt glorious to see Wenshu's head roll down all those stairs leading up to cloud recesses, his head thumping against every single stair. The death of his eldest, of course, angered Wen Ruohan, who appeared to stop at nothing to get his revenge on the Lan sect for the death of his heir. 2 more attacks came against the Lan over the course of 3 months, each growing with size and manpower. Wei Ying and Lan Zhan had temporarily moved into the Jinshi, after heavily warding the Dauphin Wei's settlement with layer after layer of protection arrays. The pair worked vigorously on updating Cloud Recess's wards after each attack, changing and altering aspects that were weak, that the Wens seemed to have figured out and were targeting. The 4th attack was sudden. Typically, there were spotters who were able to relay that a sizable Wen army was approaching, but this time they scattered and converged right at the steps of Cloud Recesses, quickly making their way up the stairs, with Wen Ruohan leading them. They had barely had any time to prepare, so Wei Ying had to resort to his last hope. Lan Zhan, I'm going to have to, he said, his eyes locked on the gates of Cloud Recesses. He watched as the blue and red wards shimmered, battle wards barely being activated in time. Lan Zhan was a firm presence at his side, the rest of his family and those capable of fighting standing behind them. Lan Zhan ran a hand down Wei Ying's arm, clasping on top of his as he tightly clutched Chenking. He had gone into the burial mounds a few weeks after their initial arrival, determined to remake his trusted flute once more. This time, however, with more control with what he was doing. We'll play cleansing for Wei Ying when we're done, he softly spoke, rubbing his hand back up Wei Ying's arm, cupping his face. Wei Ying, don't hold back. To say it was a fair fight wouldn't be nearly an accurate description. The second Chenking sounded out, the Wens never stood a chance. Wei Ying had never had a chance to go directly against Wen Ruohan, only knowing that even the combined strength of Nai Mingjue and Lan Shichen had barely been enough to counter Wen Ruohan, yet not strong enough to kill him. Wen Ruohan targeted him immediately, practically shoving past his own men to get closer to Wei Ying and Lan Zhan. There was a fire in his eyes as he directed his power towards Wei Ying, barely even noticing Lan Zhan as he maneuvered so that the Wen were now stuck between the pair. I love the technique you're using. Resentment? Fascinating. I almost don't want to kill you so you can show me how you control it, Wen Ruohan spoke, Bichen clashing with his sword. Wei Ying paused, taking Chenking away from his lips. It's quite simple, actually. He watched the Wen's eyes widen, his interest piqued. You just need to be thrown coreless into the burial mounds by your asshole of a son, Wen Qiao, and have a will strong enough to survive escaping. Wei Ying paused, watching as Lan Zhan slowly stalked forward. You know, I think you have the temperament for it, but this is the first time I'm using it full force with the core, so I'm not sure if there's any ill effects. He shrugged, twirling the flute in his hand. You should remind me how it feels to be run through by a sword. It's a recurring injury for me. Wei Ying couldn't hold the smirk that crossed his face as the tip of Baichen came through Wen Ruohan's chest. Before the sect leader had time to react, Swabian was unsheathed and ran through his chest from the other side. Wen Ruohan fell to his knees with 2 swords running through him, the pair twisting and ripping their swords out of him as he collapsed to the ground. It was only then that the pair noticed the silence that surrounded them, looking up to see the bodies of Wen soldiers littering the ground around them, bloodied and wounded Lan standing, all staring at them. "Wen Ruohan is dead!" someone shouted, and Wei Ying finally felt his exhaustion catch up to him as he fell into Lan Zhan's waiting arms. "Rest, Wei Ying. Everything is over now," his lovely husband whispered into his ears as he closed his eyes. The death of Wen Ruohan spread. Some attempted to fill the gap in power that had been left behind, mainly Jin Guanshan, while some had started to question what would happen to the remaining members of the Wen clan now that the leader was dead. As expected, Wen Chao attempted to take his father's seat and was quickly murdered. After hearing about the death of Wen Ruohan, Wen Qing snuck away from Yiling and made her way to Cloud Recesses, needing to immediately talk with the two idiots she had slowly began to think of as little brothers. Wei Ying was still recuperating in the Jinshi. Surprisingly, there didn't appear to be any lasting damage from the amount of resentment he had channeled during the fight. It appeared that he was entirely capable of wielding both energies with precise accuracy. He really passed out due to the strain of work he had done and needed a week's worth of rest. He was not about to argue with Lan Lihua on what the proper time a patient needed to rest about after such a battle. Wen Qing had arrived unexpectedly, almost being denied entrance into Cloud Recesses if not for Lan Yangsheng's presence at the gate. She found them in the Jinshi. Wei Ying on another rant about how he felt perfectly fine and didn't need to be drinking this horrible medicine and being forced to stay in bed all day. Slamming open the door, startling the occupants, she marched in and immediately grabbed his wrist, then smacked him on the back of his head. "You idiot! Your core is still partially depleted. You're covered in bruises and you look like you're about to pass out at any second. If you won't listen to the Lan healers, then listen to me." Wen Qing spoke harshly, a glare on her face, as he merely looked up at her with a smile on his dumb face. King Ji. Just as she was about to lecture him again on resting while he was injured, his energy flared as she held his wrist, prompting her to look once more. A gasp escaped her as she pressed harder against Wei Ying's wrist. The other two occupants of the room certainly grew more and more worried the longer she probed Wei Ying's meridians. After a few minutes of silence, she let out a huff, throwing Wei Ying's hand back onto his lap before crossing the room, sitting at the table. Wen Qing poured herself a cup of Emperor Smile from the available jar on the table before downing it in one long gulp. "Wei Wuxian, in all my years of being a healer, of all the centuries the Dafen Wen have worked as exceptional healers, I have never been continually surprised by the achievements you have made." She was practically glaring at the pair. "King Ji, what did you find?" Wei Ying couldn't help but ask, nervous, despite the fact that he had seen Wen King's face when she had to deliver bad news, and that wasn't the look on her face at the moment. He clutched onto Lan Zhan's hand. Wen Qing stood and took a deep breath before bowing to the pair. "Let me be the first to congratulate you, Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji." She rose from her bow. "May the heavens grant you and your child luck and a prosperous future. Certainly, this seems as if the heavens are rewarding you for all your hard work and good deeds. The karma you both have gained has resulted in something precious." Wen King watched as realization crossed Lan Wangji's face, his eyes widening as they darted towards Wei Ying's stomach. Said man didn't understand, turning towards his husband. "Wei Ying, you're pregnant," Lan Wangji whispered, a soft smile on his face. Wei Ying turned towards Wei King, eyes wide as she nodded. How far along?" he whispered, a tear falling down his face. "By my estimates, 8 weeks. Oh my God." Wen King gave the couple a few moments to cry, to hold each other, to whisper words of love and affection before she spoke once more from the doorway. "Now, you have even more of a reason to remain on bed rest until the land healers clear you. Be diligent about the medications they bring you. No drinking, or refrain from over-the-top levels of spice. No raw meat. You are now caring for 2, Wei Wuxian. I hope this will make you pay more attention to your surroundings and not continue to throw yourself in danger, she spoke, closing the door behind her, leaving the pair in stunned silence. Lan Zhan, Wei Ying whispered, his hands cradling his stomach. Lan Zhan reached up, tucking a strand of his hair behind his ear. When Ruhan is dead, the Sunshot campaign will not happen. Lotus Pier will not be attacked, nor the Unclean Realm. Jiang Yanli and Jin Zixuan are set to wed at the end of summer. Your life is not in danger. He grabbed Wei Ying's hand, intertwining their fingers together as they rested on where their child was growing. Everything has been prevented. We have managed to keep all those we care about alive. Lan Zhan smiled. And we have been rewarded for our efforts. Anything that comes now, we will face together with our new families. We can face anything together. Wei Ying smiled at him, tears slowly falling down his face. Of course we can, though we still haven't gone to kill that bastard Xuanwu. Lan Zhan huffed out a laugh, laying Wei Ying against his chest. After they are born, when Wen Qing approves, we will go kill the Xuanwu once more. Wei Ying nodded. Good. I'm still mad about it biting your leg. Okay, so that is technically the end. There's one more chapter, though. Here are the notes. Thank you all for reading and being patient with me as I took way longer than I like to update. It is sad to finally finish this fic, but I have more waiting in the wings to work on. Tying up loose ends. Wen Qing became sect leader of the disorganized Wen sect, bringing herself and Wen Ning out of hiding. Everyone is ecstatic for the pregnancy, but no one is more excited than A-Yuan. It's a girl, and she has everyone wrapped around her finger. Madame Yu tries to convince Salans that Wei Wuxian certainly had to have done something to Lan Wangji to get him to not only marry him, but run away with him, but ultimately fails because after all the work and improvements Wei Ying has done for the Lan clan, as well as everyone loving him, they are fiercely protective of him, and they are constantly seeing how grossly in love the pair are, so coercion is not something that even seems plausible. The resentment was only an issue until Lan Yongsheng yelled at the elders that Wei Ying had used it to protect their home, that it was the only reason they were able to defeat Wen Ruohan without as many casualties. After that, Wei Ying has never used resentment unless called for and explained his methods to the elders. They still live with the Weis in their settlement outside of Yiling, but they take constant trips to Cloud Recesses and Nightless City. Again, thank you for sticking with me and hopefully enjoying. Check out my other MDZS fics if you like. Kudos are appreciated, comments are loved. Mitch. Alright, one more chapter. Chapter 8. Wen King quickly turned around at the sound of shattering, abandoning the mortar and pestle she had been working with. Wen Ning was just standing there, eyes wide, shattered bowl and scattered herbs on the floor, scattered all across his feet. Aji, he whispered, the first tear sliding down his face. Wen Ning just stared at her as she ran to him, cupping his cheeks, wiping away the tears as they kept falling, holding him when he finally broke, sobbing into her neck as she gently kneeled them down onto the floor. A few minutes passed before Wen Ning was able to calm himself enough to speak. Gigi, are Wei Gonzi and Lan Gonzi here too? Wei Qing looked at him, really looked at him, at the wide-eyed gaze he was giving her, the way his hands tightly held onto hers. There was something there, but she couldn't pick out exactly what it was. Of course they are. You just saw them this morning. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind his ear. You had breakfast with them and A-Yuan. A-Yuan. Wen Ning whispered, a small smile on his face as he threw his arms around Wen King. I missed you so much, Gigi. Gigi. Before Wen King could speak, before she could ask what Wen Ning meant, They'd been together for the whole day. How could he miss her? The door flew open, the intruder not even bothering to knock. King Ji, are you okay? I felt a wave of... Wei Wuxian's words stopped as his eyes landed on the siblings on the floor, at the tears and the smile that Wei Ning was directing towards him. Wei Gonzi. Ning, I thought we had moved beyond Gonzi. Wei Wuxian harumphed, crossing his arms over his chest. Xiangaga, then? Like A-Yuan? Wei Wuxian's arms fell to his side, eyes widening as he... Wei Ying, is everything okay? Lan Zhan spoke, walking into the room. Wei Wuxian turned to his husband, mouth opening and closing before he simply pointed at Wei Ning. Ghost General, he whispered, almost like he was afraid of the assumption he was making. Wen King watched as Lan Zhan's eyes widened, a hand darting out and grabbing one of Wei Wuxian's as he then turned his eyes towards Wei Ning. Han Guanjun, Sui Jun, Chefeng Zun, and Lan Xiangsheng found the array. Wei Qing pushed her brother slightly, eyes wide, carefully absorbing what he had spoken. Ning, are you also from the future? Wei Ning simply nodded, eyes watering. Wait. Lan Wangji's words quieted the room. You were supposed to be dead. Wei Qing flinched at the word, knowing the fate that had awaited her and her brother, her family, that horrible future Lan Wangji and Wei Wuxian came from. Honor Gonzi, I think we all know that the words of Jin Guanshan should never be trusted. Wei Ning quietly spoke, his gaze turning towards Wei Wuxian. But Wei Ge, how did you get here? How long have you been here? Wei Wuxian had crossed the room, kneeling on the floor next to Wei Ning, gently placing a hand on his head. Lan Zhan and I have been here for 2 years. Maybe almost 3, I think. We arrived back at the beginning of the Cloud Recess's lectures and immediately left. Left? Well, he glanced back towards Lan Wangji. We spoke with Lan Zhan's father. He's the one who's really been changing things while we essentially abandon everyone. Lan Zhan's father. He's the one who's really been changing things while we essentially abandon everyone else. Priority was keeping you and your family safe, so that's what we did. Our family, Ying. Wei King mumbled, looking down at Wei Ning's hands in hers. And A-Yuan? What does he remember? How is he here? There we go. Wen Ning spoke, explaining what they thought would happen when the array had activated. He described Lan Xichen's experience. The following morning, coming to the Jingxi to find Lan Wangji's limp form leaning against the table, A-Yuan motionless, laying across his lap. How he had frantically rushed through the room when Lan Wangji hadn't moved, when he hadn't responded to his call, when A-Yuan hadn't moved. Wei Ning told the 3 of them how Lan Xichen had screamed, calling for someone, anyone, to come help. How Cloud Recesses has been put on lockdown, not knowing if something had broken through the wards and killed his brother and nephew, stolen their very souls. He recalled what Lan Xichen had told him to say, the words he wanted to get to his brother, should the array work as it should, describing in length about how he had scoured the entire Jingxi, not leaving a board unturned, a corner unchecked, a page of a book not examined, until he finally found what had caused such an event. The letter hadn't been touched until Lan Kairen frantically entered into the Jingxi, pausing at the still form of Lan Wangji as he now laid on the floor, next to the table his Guqin sat on, A-Yuan lying on the floor next to him. Lan Xichen had watched as Lan Kairen fell to his knees in the entryway of the Jingxi, refusing to believe what the disciples had called for him had said, refusing to believe that Wangji was dead. It had been Lan Kairen who detected the energy in the letter when he picked it up, infusing his energy into the paper to reveal an array that spanned the whole length of the page, the array that had taken his nephew away from him. He didn't understand what had happened. The page was blank, nothing written on the paper, yet the sigils in the array appeared to be dependent on words being on the page. But Lan Kairen didn't have time to ponder such an array, not when his nephew was dead on the other side of the table. his eldest nephew hyperventilating on the other side of the room. It was with Lan Xiansheng's help that they were able to decipher the array. Wei Jun and Shifeng were going to figure out how to activate it when Shifeng died. Wei Ning shook his head. Lan Xichen said anything else fell to the background after he lost his best friend. I wouldn't doubt that they were much more than friends. Lan Wangji quietly spoke, eyeing Wei Wuxian. Oh, now, wouldn't that be something? I wonder if anything's going on now between them. He turned back to Wei Ning. Sorry, Ning. Continue, please. Wei Ning nodded. It wasn't until, Shifeng had been murdered by Jin Guanyao. He used a manipulated form of cleansing. Zui Jun described it as having a piece that could kill with 7 notes woven into it. He looked at Lan Wangji, who nodded. Eventually his severed body parts started showing up, causing chaos. And that led to Jin Guanyao's scheming being revealed and how you weren't dead? Wei King spoke, a tear sliding down her face as Wei Ning nodded. When Zui Jun found me, I was unconscious. Xu Yang had put some type of consciousness-suppressing nails in my head. It was once I was conscious, Jin Guanyao killed, that Zui Jun remembered the array. What they had theorized had happened when it activated. Wei Wuxian hummed, nodding. I could see how they could manipulate it into sending someone else back other than the intended target. He laughed. I mean, A-Yuan certainly was not intended to come back, but here he is. Wei Wuxian rested a hand on his stomach, as well as his sibling. Wei Ning's eyes looked as if they were moments away from bulging out of his head when he looked down, finally noticing the swell of Wei Wuxian's stomach. What? Oh yeah, so turns out mine and Lan Zhan's spiritual energy are so compatible that they can make life. He patted his husband's hand as it joined his on his stomach. A-Yuan has been very excited to be a Dagua. And everyone else? Everyone is fine? Alive? Wei Ning spoke, eyes wide and wet as Wei Wuxian nodded, a wide smile on his face. Everyone is safe. Everyone is alive. Well, he paused. Not Wen Ruohan. He's very much dead. So there was never much of a war, just a few attacks on cloud recesses. Wei Ning blinked, a smile on his face as he wiped away more tears before getting back on topic. Zui Jun and Lan Xiansheng couldn't decide what to do with me. Wei Ning winced at his words. They knew I had been wronged, that Wei Ge had been wronged, that they were wrong about the whole thing. So they didn't know what to do with me. Not until they remembered the array. He met Wei Wuxian's gaze. I'm familiar enough with your handwriting that I was able to decipher what they could not. I was able to read the letter when they could not. So, 3 months after I'd been freed, they performed the array, hoping to send me back to wherever Hong Guanjun had landed, hoping that it was a better past, that Wei Ge was with him, that they were both happy and healthy and not held back by the people who had only proven to not have their best interests at heart, as history had shown. It is, Lan Wangji spoke. Those we care for know the truth, and with that truth they have thrown us into a future where all that we wanted will happen. No one will die in a war no one wanted to fight. Wei Ying's core remains strong within him, Jiang Wanyin will never harm him again, and Xiangsheng won't have to endure another moment of being clan leader before he is fully ready to take up the mantle. Father has ensured that no one will pressure him to step down, that he is fully capable of running his sect without assistance from individuals who seek to undermine him. Azan. Wei Ying started, huffing a laugh. I think Ning gets it. Things are better. And Wei Ning's eyes drifted to Wei Wuxian's stomach. The baby? Yes, the baby. Wen King groaned. Ning. I don't know how annoying Wei Wuxian was in the future, but he is insufferable while pregnant. I'm not that bad. Even A-Yuan has commented on your whining, Wen King shot back, rolling her eyes as Wei Ying turned to his husband, wide-eyed as he looked at him. You don't think I'm annoying, do you, Azan? Of course not. Lan Wangji brushed a hair off Wei Wuxian's face. How dare I slander the mother of my child? That's worse, Wei Wuxian whined, planting his face in the fabric of Lan Wangji's shoulder, muffling his words, betrayed by the soft laughter that comes from the others in the room. Lan Kairen looked down at the remains of the glowing array, at the limp form of Wen Qianlin. He didn't move when Lan Xichen falls to his knees, sobbing into his hands. He doesn't move when the array ceases to glow. He doesn't move when the sun sets, blanketing the room into darkness. He doesn't move when his nephew comes back into the room, trying to get him to move, to leave, to come out, telling him that he doesn't need to be in that room anymore, that he's arranged for a proper burial for Wen Qianlin. Lan Kairen doesn't move when the Lan disciples enter into the room, placing Wen Qianlin's stiffening body onto a stretcher, carrying him out of the room, leaving a smudged array in their wake. Lan Kairen doesn't move when the sun comes back up, when Lan Xichen comes back into the room, when he plays Cleansing and Clarity and any other song he can think of to convince Lan Kairen to look at him, to get him to move, to leave, to do anything other than stare at the remains of the array. Lan Kairen finally looks down at his hands, at the cinnabar still staining his fingertips, at the ink stains on the edges of his sleeves from piercing the array back together, rewriting it to do what they wanted it to do. He looks down at his hands and wonders if Wen Qianlin got there, when he was, that Wangji was happy, that he was safe, that Lan Kairen hadn't fucked up his life once more and failed him. Eventually he turned, heading towards the entryway where he knew Lan Xichen was kneeling, waiting for him to return. He glanced back at the array, the deep red cinnabar, the talisman papers strung around the Jingxi, the home that Lan Wangji lived in, died in. He stepped outside into the bright rays of the sun, saw the kneeling, nodding off form of his eldest nephew, and closed the door behind him. All right. So the last author notes are here. It has been like a year and a half. Has it been like a year and a half since I finished this fic? Yes. Was this last chapter always something I wanted to write? Also yes. I couldn't just leave this fic alone. Wen Ning deserved to have his family back too. Plus, some closure from the future, I suppose. Hello to anyone new this new chapter brings. Read my other MDZS fics if you would like. Mitch. Edit as I'm posting this. I literally forgot that Wen Ning and Wen King are now Weis. So back to editing I go. LOL. And with that, we have finished the time traveling letter series. So that ended up a little bit longer than I thought, and there were a few more Wi-Fi interruptions than I was hoping for, but I hope that it didn't really detract from the quality or your enjoyment of the story. I am so very grateful that MichelleFeather let me do this. I'm probably saying your name wrong, which I really apologize for. I wasn't sure if it was MichelleFeather, but thank you. Make sure to check them out. The link is in the description. They're super cool. They have a lot of really good works that I enjoy. But happy holidays. And thank you for listening. Bye-bye. Gotta look at the actual camera. Bye.